Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. This is the Dearborn Board of Education School District of the City of Dearborn Board Study Session Meeting. Today is Monday, January 5th, 2025. It is 6:03, 2026. There you go. Happy New Year again. I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Sure. Trustee Al-Jahmi.
Here.
Trustee Bezzi.
Here.
Trustee D'Ambrosio.
Here.
Vice President Petlichkov.
Here.
Trustee Suboh.
Here.
Trustee Zahar here. President Mosib.
Here. Thank you. Next item.
Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand if you're able to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So today's study session is to study the infrastructure of our district and study an upcoming suggested bond. We will begin our agenda as posted with citizen participation if any citizens would like to address us. We will also open the floor to citizens at the end of the meeting to address us if they have any questions, because I do understand that sometimes things come up and citizens wants to address us after. We'll give them that chance as well. So do we have any blue cards?
No, we don't have any blue cards at this point, Mr. President.
Okay. We can go to the next item.
The next item is a discussion. Item 1, infrastructure needs.
So at this point, I'll turn it to Superintendent Saror, who will do the introduction of our panel as well.
Good evening, Board. Before I begin, I wanted to make a little note about Trustee Petlichkov. I think today is the first day that you are the only locally elected female in our city, correct?
It is.
Congratulations. So I told you earlier, if they were to pick one female, they picked the right one.
Thank you.
Allow me to introduce our guests today. In front of you, you have representatives from Byram Fisk. We have Mark Fisk and Jacqueline Wayne Geit. And from Quinn Evans, we have Denise Close and Ann Dilcher. And from Gilbane, we have Stephanie Corona and Amra Amro. Along with them is Tom Wall and David Mustinen, and they're here to provide clarity, provide information, answer any questions, and really, hopefully, the outcome is that all board members have a better understanding to make sound decisions moving forward. Thank you.
Great. So we will begin with Mr. Wall and Mr. Mustinen.
Good evening, Board. Thank you so much for putting this together today so that we can have an opportunity to begin this very important discussion. Tonight, here at this side of the table, we thought we'd start off with just a little bit from, I will turn it over to Mr. Wall, and he will can introduce the folks from Quinn Evans and give you a little bit of just an overview and bring us all back up to speed. We know there's been a lot of information shared with you over these past several months, and then right before the break, we shared quite a bit of information, a whole folder full of information as well. And I know there's a lot to digest there, so hopefully we'll be able to give just a little overview. Also joining me on this side of the table, representatives from Byram and Fisk, who will be able to provide a little bit of an overview, too, on some of the work that's been done just over the past several months in regards to facilitating some community input and feedback. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Wall first, and then when they wrap up, we can come back over to this side of the table.
Good evening, Board. Just for your review and for people that are listening, we had our Fielding International report that was done and completed. But we felt that with the ESSER funds and some of the wraparound general fund that we did a lot of construction, that we engaged in RFP, and Quinn Evans was the selected vendor to kind of update our numbers and also look at the historical aspects in our buildings. So they completed books 1, 2, and 3 for the board. And it kind of summarizes what they did, along with the help of Gilbane, to kind of put a financial number to it all, to kind of review what Fielding did and give us an update on our numbers. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Stilcher and Ms. Close to kind of give you a quick update about their engagement.
Good evening. We were here about 6 months ago, and there are new faces and new ideas we know, so we're interested in listening tonight and answering questions. Denise and I are here from Quinn Evans, a firm that's been in Michigan for over 40 years with offices in both Ann Arbor and Detroit. And we were brought here to the team for our work on K-12 projects, but also for our work with existing buildings and historic buildings and understanding the costs of renovation and the value of those buildings. So we've teamed with Gilbane. We have, as introduced before, Stephanie Corona and Amro behind us. We are working in Detroit and Ann Arbor with Gilbane on several projects, and we felt they were the right partner to come in also to help really understand the numbers for a project like this. You wanna? Oh, he is flipping, sorry. Flipping to see where we are on the slides. So the goals of this assessment were to understand the historic context of these buildings and go in and understand the building conditions, both from an overview of the site perspective and from a building adaptability perspective. The information had done previously very specifically on building systems, but this to look and understand, much like the work we are doing for other districts, what does it take to adapt a building for the new model of 21st century schools? What are the new demands being asked of schools that were not there in the 20s, 30s, 50s when these schools were built? Where are the pressure points, the pain points, and what's the opportunities in these buildings? And for in each case, we looked at to understand a perspective and a cost on the buildings of what if there was a new building on the site? Is there even enough space on some of these sites to put a new building or
Sorry,
take on?
Chair Moses, can you see if they can get this on?
Yeah, can we get the
monitor?
screen shared on both TVs? Same screen that's,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
All right. And then what's involved in a major renovation or expansion of a historic building, and then a level of renovation. Some buildings may not need as extensive work, and what's the cost and what's projected for the schools in terms of a renovation.
So based on all of that cumulative research, the priorities that we were able to define, again, based on the building conditions and projected enrollments and such, priorities that came about from talking with principals and teachers and building engineers: safety and security, restrooms, student support spaces, infrastructure, and a lot of things on the site, things with traffic control, playgrounds. And so that's kind of where we landed. And then we put together a map, and we prioritized all of the buildings in the district and which ones we thought were a critical priority based on the conditions we found or projected conditions in the future. And we ranked all of the buildings. So we have 4 that are at a critical priority, some that are high, moderate, low. And I think also within that, the critical priority is not necessarily we think these need to be a new building, but we think they need attention, and that attention might be a new building. It might be a study to understand if that's really the right path forward. And all of that is laid out in the volume 1 as a summary, and then more detail in the other 2 volumes, which I know you have all seen.
Okay. So now we will share some information. I'll turn this over to Mark, and he can, let me just check. exchange presentations here.
Sounds good. Happy New Year to the board. Great to be here in Dearborn. I grew up in Dearborn Heights. I hope you won't hold it against me, Chargers, but my mother was an English teacher at Fordson for several years, so great to be back here. We are Byram and Fisk Communications. We are a strategic communications firm, and we've helped numerous school districts, big and small, to research, plan, and implement successful bond efforts. So we are glad to be here. And these are districts, you know, large like Dearborn, the Detroit Public School District, Utica, but also very small districts, Baldwin, Community, Caledonia. And we've done a lot of work in the public education space, working with My Leap on the Pre-K for All program, the Student Collaborative Research Program. So we've got a deep, deep history in public education. We're glad to be here. And I do want to stress that the research we're going to give an overview on, I believe, is one of the most comprehensive research programs we have done for a district. It's very comprehensive. And we started very broad and got less broad and got very, very specific. So I applaud you for reaching out and really listening to the community. The information we have, I think, will allow you to say that you have a broad-based, wide-range series of perceptions and opinions about the district and about what they want to do in the future of the school district there. It was also very unique in one other regard. This really is special. We did not test a specific bond proposal. We did not give numbers. We did not say these are the specific improvements. This is not how much it's going to cost you a month. We actually intentionally left out those specifics because we wanted to let the research go where it may go. We wanted to really listen to the community and just bring you that information so that there was no sense that this is some way preordained or there was a foregone conclusion or any of our assumptions. We let the research pretty much go where it would, and no surprise to you, the community was very blunt and very forthright about their opinions about things. So with this research, if you choose to pursue a bond and infrastructure improvement proposal, I think you'll have confidence that the research behind it is quite solid and that you have gathered a wide cross-section of perceptions. Let me give you kind of the key takeaways from the research. One, I believe without a doubt that there is an openness to a bond proposal, a school improvement proposal. Folks feel good about Dearborn Public Schools. They view it as a pillar of the community. They see it as attracting new families and new opportunities here. People are very positive about that. They see it as increasing property values. So they see the work you're doing matters and it improves their quality of life. However, there is a real tension that you're going to have to reckon with as you assemble this proposal, which is the financial squeeze that residents are feeling in Dearborn, especially the younger residents. This came through loud and clear. And that's a tension that really cannot be ignored as you begin to wrangle through and assemble the scope of the bond and which projects you pick and how much you want the voters to pay for this, because the younger folks are feeling quite squeezed on housing, they're feeling it on utility bills, and they just can't afford a whole lot more. So that's a tension there. I also think the third takeaway is that we need, if you do decide to pursue a bond, that factual, accurate communication will be critical, informing the community of what you're doing, how the money's going to be spent, and what transparency measures will be in place to ensure that that taxpayer dollars, which is very precious, is spent wisely, I think is just critical for success. And so with that, next slide. Yes, so we talked about comprehensive. We did 3 pieces of research here, and again, this is very unique and very comprehensive. We started off with what we call in-depth interviews. These were 19 45-minute interviews, almost 300 pages of transcriptions, largely with government officials, education experts, and community leaders, so very, very high level. And these interviews kind of set up the basis for the rest of the research, the focus groups, and the polling. Here's some things that in those in-depth interviews we were told very directly. One, Dearborn is a special community. People are very proud to be in Dearborn, and they're optimistic about the future of Dearborn, and that the schools are very highly regarded. despite a lot of the challenges. And that could be multilingual challenges, income equality challenges. Folks really do hold the school in high regard. Again, despite the optimism, there are divides in the community, and I think you're all aware of them. There's East versus West versus South, Muslim and Christian, Yemeni, Lebanese, parents and non-parents. A lot of folks said you have to get to the non-parents. The parents know the situation, but we have to get out the word to people who are not parents in the community. They don't have the information. But the biggest divide, again, was on property taxes and the reluctance to pay more, and this is really an age gap. We saw that some of the older residents we talked to were much more open to paying a little bit more, and those younger folks are much more reluctant to paying more. Couple of things. Modernization and HVAC upgrades, no-brainers. They see those as necessary. Just like you have to fix a roof on your house, you have to fix a roof on a school. But they, in the in-depth interviews, folks wanted to see something with a little more, I guess you'd say, a little more pizzazz, career tech, something future-oriented, something that looks to the future as well, to get folks excited about it. But across those interviews, the infrastructure upgrades were no-brainers. And again, this came through. We need to be accurate, we need to be factual, we need to be transparent, and make sure that we're giving folks the information they need and answering the questions they have. And if we don't, folks who oppose this bond will exploit that. And that's just a fact. That came out of those in-depth interviews. We then moved to focus groups. We did 4 focus groups, and they were comprised of one group of younger Arabic women, younger Arabic men was another group, white seniors, and then we had white non-parents of varying ages and education. And again, we started to see some similar patterns emerging in these focus groups as well. Optimism about Dearborn and about the future of the city, schools being worthy of tax dollars. They want their tax dollars going to the schools. They see the schools as a pillar of the community, higher property values, secure neighborhoods. They get it. They understand if strong schools make strong communities. But again, we see younger voters much more reluctant to pay more, much more negative actually on infrastructure, roads, the services they get, the value for the dollars they're putting in, a lot more questions from the younger voters. This really is something different that we're seeing in research. There was a time where it was actually the older voters who were much more pessimistic, much more resistant to tax questions. That has changed really since COVID over the last 5-6 years, and it's actually the younger voters who are feeling like, I just don't know if I can afford an extra $100, $200. Another thing, they are vaguely aware that the district's facilities are old, but they don't have a lot of specifics on that. There's not an awareness of the specifics. The one exception that we found in the focus groups is air conditioning. People are really awakening to the fact that these schools get very, very hot, they're uncomfortable, and if we want them to be healthy, we need a proper HVAC system. So that did come out of those groups. And last but not least, well, 2 things I should say, traffic around the schools. Universally, we've got traffic issues. Either some people see it as a safety issue or an annoyance, but it did come up organically. And last but not least, in the focus groups, and this was across all 4 groups, mental health. The growing awareness of mental health strains on students came through loud and clear in these focus groups. So they were very open to new spaces for counselors and helping to support our young people who are feeling stress like never before. We then moved into the survey, the polling survey, where we surveyed 400 registered voters across the city, and here's what they told us. Just click it. Okay. So, and here you can see by the slide, 61% say Dearborn is going in the right direction. That's pretty good feeling, given everything that's going on in the economy. This is largely driven by Arab resident optimism. They believe the community is headed in the right direction. And a lot of concerns still about groceries, about insurance and cost of living, but generally people are feeling good about Dearborn, and we have seen that as a nice backdrop if you decide to pursue a bond proposal. People are feeling good about the city. Next slide, please. They rate Dearborn schools higher than surrounding districts. You know, a majority of them said that Dearborn schools are doing better than surrounding districts. They're very supportive of the teachers. if you decide to pursue a bond, teachers are great messengers. They're great validators. They're trusted. They're viewed as non-biased and on the ground. And so they are very, very good messengers. And they also said repeatedly that having good schools helps everybody. It helps us have stable neighborhoods, higher property values, attracts new families to the communities. Next slide, please. So, voters generally view the conditions of the school as good. And you can see the numbers there. 70% to 28% overall view the facilities as either excellent or good. So what does that tell us? It says we probably have some work to do in terms of public education to show people the dire needs that some of these facilities have, because it's not immediately aware to them, and we saw that in the focus groups as well. Next slide. This is pretty good. Pretty good. We've seen this with other districts too, that the view on our financial management as a district is about 50-50. Okay? That might, everybody of course wants that score to be higher, but that in terms of other schools we've worked with is pretty good, especially given the skepticism that people have in terms of how our taxpayer dollars are being spent. Next slide, please. So we simulated, again, using a theoretical millage. We didn't use a specific millage, but we said, okay, would you support or oppose a hypothetical millage? And you can see we did 3 different exercises. So the first 2 pillars are the initial vote. We gave them no information. We just said, would you theoretically support a millage? And you can see 61 to 34 yes to no. Again, these are with no specifics, nothing, just would you support one to help do updates and improve? And your opposition is about 34%. Not a bad place to begin with. Again, some of that support with that light blue is soft, but it is a good place to start. Then we give them a series of pieces of positive information. Here are some things that we might consider addressing with a bond like that. And you can see that those numbers then go up to 74-23. So this is after some positive information, real basic stuff about infrastructure and career tech and different things that you might fund. In fairness and balance, you always like to do a little, what we call a stress test. Because if you just give positive information, you get kind of a glass is half full look at what's happening with the proposal. So we did test, I guess you'd call it a negative message against the bond, which talked about the high taxes in the city, that we've been taxed enough already, the school should live within its means. After that, you do see some support shift away, 69 to 29, but it's still, even after that negative information, it shows an openness for some kind of school improvement proposal. Next slide. So here's where that tension we talked about comes. These are just supporters. So when we ask them, how much would you be willing to spend, 71% picked the lowest funding option, or they refused all options entirely. And we gave it to them 2 different ways. We said we did it as a yearly amount, and we did it as a monthly amount. And in both cases, there are some marginal difference. They're probably a little better to frame it as a monthly cost than a yearly cost, but you can see that even the strong supporters gravitate to the lowest cost option of $300 a year or $25 a month. So that, to me, speaks to that, again, financial tension that is in the community. Among the most important priorities for updates, we see infrastructure as number 1. This is your roofs, this is your bathrooms, this is your floors, kind of your meat and potato upgrades. No one disagrees with that. That's a kind of a no-brainer in terms of the research part of it. And then the second piece, which leapt out, is this skilled trades. If we can give young people, use the bond to give people skills, hands-on education, skilled trades, certifications, again, preparing them for the jobs of the future, this really was a winner too in terms of priorities there. And third would be, again, your HVAC. There's other priorities there we tested, special ed, security STEM. Those are all good too, but in terms of your top 3 or 4, it's really your infrastructure, your career tech and skilled trades, and then it's your HVAC. Next slide. We tested several what we call messages or convincing statements on why you would support a theoretical proposal, and most of them really centered around the economy, jobs in our community. By far, the two top messages, the most convincing reasons to support the bond was that it was preparing kids for the jobs of the future, giving them skills that they need to go out there and compete and get jobs. And that includes hands-on education in the skilled trades. And the second most compelling message was it's for everyone. That if you improve the schools, it helps everybody in the community. It helps us with higher property values. So those are definitely good messages, and I think you have a suite of possible messages if you choose to pursue a bond. So a couple of key takeaways. Finally, just to wrap up, make it about classrooms, make it about the kids and the impact on kids. People understand kids are our future, and they want this to be about the kids and the impact on kids, as opposed to administrators, and that whatever actions you choose, let's make them tangible, let's make them measurable, let's make them understandable. Folks are very skeptical about how their tax dollars are being spent, so the more transparent it could be. Several people suggested, for example, could we put just factual information on a government website, like the city website, for example, came up as an idea. They just want factual information on the bond, and I think that's going to be very helpful. In addition, we did ask them, would you prefer a smaller bond, even if we had to come back to you later to do the rest of the improvements now and build on that success, or would you prefer a big bond? And most people did say we would prefer a smaller millage, come back to us later for the rest of the urgent repairs. So,
Do you have specific numbers on that, or as far as big versus small bond?
we did not test that. We tested theoretically a bigger, kind of do-it-all approach
I see.
versus break up the bond into pieces, and they clearly wanted to break it up into pieces.
And that was upon our direction. We did not want to, as Mark pointed out, we did not want to imply that there was a done deal out there already.
Right.
That the board had already decided on a dollar amount. So that's why we instructed that this survey be very open-ended to make sure that everyone knew there was no preconceived plans.
So,
And just to wrap, last thing, there's an openness to pass a bond. You have the tough work of deciding, do we do a bond? What does that bond look like? Just be aware of the financial squeeze that people are feeling. That's very real in Dearborn. And it is across the state, but it's very, very pronounced in Dearborn. And last but not least, communications, accurate, transparent, consistent, making the case for it, using the best messengers, I think is a possible path to win. So with that, we'll take any questions.
All right. Trustee Peliskov and then Trustee Czar.
Okay, a couple things, because I've been through this many times over the years. The one thing to be able to message more easily, I guess, to the community at large, who is not necessarily very well ensconced in district finances, is when the difference, I think when people are saying we would rather than trying to explain a large, all one and done bond that may expand over a 30-year period, but trying to explain to them how it would be divvied up as we progress through, and you're not all gonna be hit with it at one time, but you're not all gonna see results at one time, is hard for people to, the concept of it is. I also understand people maybe are more comfortable with the smaller bond because they can see whether we're actually going to do what we say we're going to do. And it can have some value and trust in it. Yes, we asked for this amount. They said they were going to use it for this. They did. Now let's move on and get to the next phase. And it might be a different group of voters, more than likely it would, come a 10 or 15-year passage of time, and you'd have to go through that effort again, but you might have more success in passing it. So that's just my 2 cents worth of understanding how people view those large dollar figures. So that's number one. Number two, I was kind of surprised to see the skilled trades piece for one reason. We are a P14 district, and we have Henry Ford College that does a lot of skilled trades training. We also have an absolutely phenomenal opportunity for our students during their high school experience to take advantage of that for free. So they're getting opportunities to get a lot of that skilled training already. And we are doing a major expansion over at Henry Ford College right now to help support that also. So I'm wondering whether we just need to do a better job of explaining to community of what's already out there and that's already available to them, so that when we do put forward a proposal of what we would do with that money, they can see that we've already got an investment in this community, that we don't have to take our resources to recommit to at our P12 buildings, but rather that we can use it for other efforts in the infrastructure realm. So that might be something that we would have to work on in the communication part, that a lot of people are just unaware that of that opportunity already exists for the most part, and that we are giving it, or they're looking for something where the kids don't have to move out of the building, but and I'm not exactly sure what they mean by skilled trades. Are they talking about they want shop classes and auto shop and that back in, or are they talking more in the IT arena or something? It would be interesting to find out what they're conceiving of, because a lot of the kids in this community don't seem to be trending that way anyhow. They seem to want to go on to a 4-year college experience and go into a more, not a manual labor type of environment anyhow. I was a little surprised to see that.
Trustee Zahar?
I have a few questions. First, thank you. A little correction on one of the slides in the beginning when you were talking about one of your first ones. I don't know if you have to go back to it. Anyway, you said you had interviewed Arabic people. Please, it's Arab, not Arabic, okay? Arabic's a language. Did you, I have a few questions just so I understand how people understood this. Did you explain, and sorry if you said any of these things, did you explain to the respondents in your surveys or your polls how long it might take before they see results? Like if we pass a bond, how long all this stuff is going to take?
We did not get into that part of the discussion.
Okay. And to build on President Moseb's question, at the very end, you said that people more preferred a small bond and then come back to us later rather than a big bond. How did you come to that? He asked for like a number. I mean, how did you come to that conclusion? Did you?
Well, we did, it's a great question, if I could. We
Yeah.
did pairing statements. I could share those with you, where we said, here's 2 possible positions, and I could give you the exact wording if you want, but we said, which one is closer to your opinion? Do the larger bond and sort of get it all out of the way, or to break it up into pieces? Which one's closer to your opinion? And we let them score that. So we gave them mutually exclusive statements, and we said, which one is closer to your point of view? That's how we asked it.
What does that mean? We let them score that. I don't know what that means.
Well, we said, which one is closer to your point of view?
So it wasn't a yes or no question.
No, statement 1 or statement 2.
Which one is closer to your point of view? And then what does that mean? They score. Sorry, I don't know what that means.
They said they chose which of those 2 statements
Right.
were closer to their point
So
of
it
view.
was binary. So
Yes.
they would say, I like this statement. Okay, so you don't have numbers for that?
Well, we do have numbers for the scores. If you want me to look them up, I could get those.
Yeah,
for
I
you.
think that's what President.
Yeah, that's what I
That's what
was
President
looking for,
Mosep
just to
meant.
see if there's a huge,
You know, like if,
standard
whether it was like 75% of them said we want a smaller bond, or it's like 55%.
I can read it to you.
Okay, great.
So it's now I'm going to read you the following pairs of statements. For each one, please tell me which comes closer to your point of view, even if neither is exactly right. So statement 1. It would be best to fund a larger millage for 20 years to address all the critical issues in the district. Statement 2. It would be best to fund a smaller millage for 10 years, even if a later second millage would be necessary to finish addressing the critical issues in the district.
Okay.
And so it was 38 for the first statement, 56 for the second statement.
Okay.
3850.
Does that make sense?
So 38% said yes to the first one,
Correct.
56% said yes to the second one.
That's correct.
Okay. 56, 38, that's my math. Okay, so just very few didn't answer, very few said
Some
neither?
didn't answer
Oh, some didn't answer, said
or
neither.
didn't know. I mean, sometimes people say, we don't know, I can't
Okay.
tell you.
In your experience in talking to people, did they seem, and I think you said this earlier, but I'm just want to double check. Did, excuse me, did the residents seem to understand pretty well the infrastructure crisis that's going on in the schools?
I think there's a perception gap. In one of the slides we showed, we asked people to rate the quality of the facilities, and many of them said it was either in excellent or good condition. In fact, most people did. I think 70% said it's either good or excellent. So I don't think they're aware of the crisis you're facing,
Okay.
at least based on this research.
So, okay, so they might not, so a lot of residents might not be fully aware of the infrastructure crisis, yet they were still kind of in favor of a bond.
Correct.
Okay. When you, one of the statistics or questions you showed was that, and I forget how you asked it or what it looked like, but something like people really want to stay in Dearborn. They like living here. Did you get into any of the factors of why? Or was any, did you get any deeper in like why do they want to live here?
Anecdotally, people like the diversity. They like, access. People talked about coffee shops and restaurants, and they like being in a diverse community. They see Dearborn as a growing community. They see a lot of their neighboring communities losing residents and hollowing out in terms of schools. So those were some of the reasons that were cited in terms of why they're feeling good about it.
Did they cite the schools? Like, did a lot of people
Yes.
cite the schools and the quality of the schools?
Most people were very positive on the schools. Yes, it was city services I would say was a mixed bag in terms of roads, infrastructure, water.
You can go talk to the mayor about that. Okay, we got nothing to do with that. It's the mayor's problem.
Exactly, but the schools came through as very positive.
Okay.
We'll come back to you.
Yeah, that's it.
Other
I'm
questions?
done.
Let's have.
Thank you.
Trustee
Great
Aljamian
questions.
And then Trustee Baz. Trustee Aljamian.
Well, thank you for the presentation. A couple of things I want to ask, and the first question is focused on our executive team. Has there been any enrollment study forecasted? I know several years ago there was some done. And the only reason I bring that up is there's something going on with virtual schools, and which would impact the number of students in our district or outside the buildings. There's a common factor right now that we are losing kids to virtual, whether it's within our school, whether it's outside of our school, such as Penn Foster. And I want to make sure that's a part of the assessment, that there is a forecast to tell us, how many kids we have in virtual schools, how many kids are we losing kids to virtual schools outside of our district. This is something that we brought up, and I don't think we really need to gauge, because when we do a bond for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30 years, you have to take that into consideration as you build new buildings or renovate or do. The capacity is really, we used to be at 23,000, I think maybe I'm wrong. I think
We
right now
do
we're at
actually have a
19,000.
table of enrollment over the years.
Yeah,
David, if we can get that on the screen, but go ahead.
but we're at 19,000.
Yeah.
And we're continuing to lose kids. So this is really important to make the right decision, is to be able to see the trend of kids attending school, physically attending schools. That's really important. And like I said, whether it's our schools and whether it's other schools, or charter schools for that matter, if it's a brick and mortar. So that's really important to be able to do that. As far as the capital improvement and the timeline, I think the challenge with doing a 30 years bond in doing the Big Bang is, when are you going to realize, and I say you, I mean us, the actual, if a building is going to be built in 20 years as a taxpayer, you're not seeing the value. So this is going back to picking the smaller bond, because people want to see values in their lifetime, or, you know, they might not be in Dearborn. So it's really, really important to show value for anything that we propose. In like trustees are mentioned, and infrastructure, and you mentioned the perception gap. I mean, we do have really some schools who are in really, really bad shape, and those need to be addressed. And those are the values you're going to get right away. It's going to be, you're going to see it. It's a realistic impact or value. You're going to see the value right away. So I want to make sure that the capital improvement timeline is, we show what we're going to do and when, and not to say we're going to build a school, if it's the bond is 30 years, we're going to build it in 25 years. That's not going to sell. Last item I want to make sure is regarding the skill trades. I know we have Henry Ford College, and it's a great institution, but parents want to see the skill trade and the technical focus on technology at the high school level. Unless they're going early college, that's a different situation. But we want to be able to kind of abide by the time and show that we're able to provide the skill trade, the technology at the high school level, not when they get to college or when they do dual enrollment. So I think that's the need versus what's being offered at Henry Ford. Last question, I said last, you mentioned in the poll, you said something about Arabs and optimism. So I want to distinguish, is the optimism throughout the city, or is it just throughout one group of people? I thought I heard that was said earlier. The optimism, just clarify for me, was the optimism from all or from a certain group?
It is from all. 61% say the city's heading in the right direction.
Okay.
That's a pretty good number. And that is being driven by Arab optimism. When you look at the subgroups under there, they're more optimistic than even the general population, because we wanted to look at different groups there. But it's, you know, I think that's very striking, and I think it's a positive backdrop for a possible bond.
Yeah, and I you know, my wish is that the optimism is across, not through a certain group. But I just wanted to get the clarification because I heard it, and that was kind of like stuck in my head. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Bazey?
Thank you guys for this. This has been great information. I've been going over a lot of it over our winter break. So I appreciate all the hard work that's been put into it and for you guys coming here today. Question, when you had asked a question about conditions of our schools, and there was a lot of positivity around that, was there any deviation between who was answering it as a parent versus a non-parent?
I could look that up. It would take me a minute to look at that, but it seemed, when you're at 70%, it would suggest that that's a pretty broad perception, but I could look at parents specifically on there. It just would take me, I don't know if we have that slide. Yeah. Going back to it, just want to make sure I'm quoting it. Yes, overall 70-28. We divided the voters into areas, just for better for worse, northeast, center, southeast, and west. A little bit better in the center, southeast 74-25, but it does look, when you ask the questions, how do you rate the conditions of the schools, buildings, athletic facilities, property and grounds owned and operated by Dearborn Public Schools? Most folks are pretty, I mean, their perception is they're either good or excellent.
Was it, do you know if it was divided by, you know, elementary parents, middle, and high? And the reason I make that point is because from my research looking into this, you know, some of the older facilities that have quite a bigger need, and I look at, you know, in the Quinn Evans report here, it's a lot of the elementary schools. Is there a divide in that answer between
parents and non-parents?
Parents and non-parents, but even more specific, you know, do you have elementary kids, do you have middle school kids, do you have high school kids?
I could look at that, but again, when I see and again, I will get you that information, follow up, but when I see 70%, there is a broad perception that they're in pretty good shape. You have to also understand that probably outside of the, parents and teachers and things like that, most people in the community, they don't have the intricate knowledge. The one area that I think I said, I hope I did, that where that change was on HVAC. People are really getting aware of air conditioning and heating issues and plumbing issues. There's just a growing awareness. There was a time where you didn't want to talk about air conditioning. People thought that was some kind of a luxury item. It's not. It's necessary for health and safety, but I can follow up and get you those numbers.
Okay. You had mentioned before that a lot of the comments that you were receiving, the city's heading in the right direction. When we say that, we're talking about the city of Dearborn or the school district, or was it more of a broad
The city.
question? The city.
Yeah, we asked about the city. As opposed to the state or the country, you ask how are things going in Dearborn, and generally speaking, folks are pretty upbeat, pretty positive.
Any other questions?
So we had questions for Quinn Evans. Is it time to ask now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I have some questions for you guys.
Sure.
So again, going back to the elementary schools, let me look here. Yeah, it's mainly the elementary schools. Some of the recommendations, the assessment recommendations for the elementaries, I see here, new facility not feasible, additional study needed. Just kind of eyeballing it, about half of them fall into one of those two categories. Can you elaborate a little bit on why a building would get a conclusion of new facility not feasible or additional study needed?
One of the reasons for that is the size of the site that the school is located on. And so that would lead into a bigger discussion on if the plan went forward and it was decided that you were building to have swing space and moving students to another neighborhood for a certain amount while you demolish the school that was there to build a new school. So for those, and then looking at the cost of and the need for the renovation work versus putting in a new school on there, that's where we looked at it and from our numbers opinion, felt that it was, not feasible to do that at that site. On other sites, you could build on a second elementary school, and then you could demolish or reuse, or you could use the school there for staging if that was a discussion or something there. But I think in those, it had to do with the site, and then it had to do with looking at what really were the needs, and did it make sense to from a feasibility dollar standpoint, demolish a school and build new. Was trying to, sort of bring some of those dollars in versus sort of earlier studies that said from only looking at the sort of educational, 21st century educational, we feel we would want a brand new school, and that study looked at having a lot of new schools, but where is the property for these new schools and the dollars for new schools?
So if a building was, the conclusion was, new facility not feasible, are we supposed to interpret with that we should build a new building there, we just don't have the land for it, or the cost is not advantageous for us to work on this building?
It's probably a combination of both, and we could go into that more detail for which specific schools that we have that on.
The ones that say study are more so that there might be room on the site for a new building. The projected enrollment data that we were given might say that, ideally you would add 20,000 square feet. Is that possible to fit on the existing site or not? And so those, and then another one with the high schools, kind of referring to what we just talked about. We know the current enrollment, but because a lot of students are taking classes off-site, do you really have that many students in the building at one time? And so that would be an additional study that we would recommend to understand if an addition is really needed or not, and is there space on the site to make that work? So the ones that say study kind of have a lot of factors that, a lot of more possibilities available to them. We just weren't ready to say what the best approach would be without additional research.
I grow concerned with some of these schools, looking at the aging and their infrastructure, and the priority assignment on them is high. And we still need answers to that so that we can make an informed, decision about what to do moving forward.
I have Trustee Peliskov, but I do have a question right on Trustee Bazzi's point. On the schools that are on the screen here that are slated for critical priority, are those, the 4 of them, Howe, Whitmore, Salina, Intermediate, and Lowry, are those slated for replacements in the report, or do we have ones where we say we cannot do a replacement because of constraints?
A little of both.
Okay.
Do you want me to go through the 4?
If you
I'm happy
can,
to.
please. Yeah.
Yeah, so, for example, at Howe, we know, the building is in fine shape as far as the building goes, but it's not meeting the needs of the current program there. So it's overcrowded. The special needs population at that building has a lot of equipment that's causing fire hazards in the hallways and things, with just storage space lacking. And so there's infrastructure in that regard that we would say maybe that population we would recommend has a new facility that's catered just to them, and that's why Howe is labeled as a critical priority. Lowry, a beautiful building, but we found a lot of structural concerns and it's oversized for the projected enrollment numbers that we got. So that's one where it has a large site. There is a possibility of building a right-sized facility as a replacement school because of the cost of repair of that large square footage that's not needed, is a balancing act of, would you rather repair a lot of space, put a lot of work into this building, or build a new building that's right-sized? The costs were not much different for that. But it does need some attention quickly, so that's why it's critical. Whitmore Bowles is a similar situation where it's just a series of additions put on. There's some infrastructure concerns as far as structural issues, and I believe it has a pool that's also, I don't remember. Yeah, no, sorry,
That one
not the
does
pool.
not. We have other elementary schools
With the
with
pools.
pools and pool issues, yeah, but not.
But there are some concerns that we noticed some structural needs, so that, again, I don't think that one needs a new facility, but I think, it needs some updating more rapidly than some of the others, and Salina in a similar situation.
Salina is a similar situation as Whitmore.
Whitmore
Yeah.
Bowles, yep, we're not recommending a new building for that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Trustee Peliskov?
Okay, we're here tonight because we know that if we want to have any ballot proposal in the near future, we have to make some decisions. And right now, I'm hearing there's still going to be a lot of questions, because part of the problem is that, and this is nothing against the study done with asking the community what they wanted, because you were giving a set of parameters to go by. A lot of people are not aware of a dollar figure until we put it on that ballot and start moving forward with the proposal of what we're going to do with that money at basically about the same time. So it's kind of a hypothetical at this moment, those questions that were asked, that they were sharing their thoughts on, because they're probably looking at what they've seen going on in surrounding communities and what their bond proposals have looked like, which may not be the reality of what we want to try to present moving forward necessarily. I'm not making any statement, so nobody please walk away thinking otherwise. But that being said, there's still a lot of questions we need to answer because we've got a couple of issues. One, people want facts. They want clarity. They want to know, okay, you're asking for this amount of money. What am I going to see for it? And right now, we're kind of at an impasse as to we as a board, how far we want to take this and where we want to go. And that's the conversation we're about to embark on. But the problem is that once we start going down a path, it's going to kind of steer that number that we're going to present and what we can do with it. And I'm a little bit concerned that we still don't have a real good, do we know that people understand that everybody wants to see something happen at the building in their neighborhood, or they don't care and they're willing to invest in a neighborhood across the city because it really has the needs and they're willing to invest in it without maybe having that kind of investment done in their neighborhood? Do we know that? And are we prepared to try to sell that? And do we have any idea about, because I've been following the bonds that have been out there in the recent elections, and it's kind of a 50-50 hit or miss,
Mixed bag.
you know, of what people are willing. And I do know for a fact, because I've been following what was going on, because Ann Arbor had a $1 billion bond, and when they actually started to do the work, everybody was like, I didn't know that's what it was going to look like. I didn't think. And what happened was a lot of people were unaware of the disruption to their neighborhood, to their school community, that the kids were going to have boundary changes or this or that. So we need to get all of that information out there in order to also have a dollar figure attached to it that we know will be supported by the community. And I just want to, you know, whatever conversation we have, I think we still have a few pieces here that we are not real clear on as to whether at the end of the day, when we say, we're honoring what we heard you say, but this is what it's going to cost, and now you're going to have them pull back. So that's just my cautionary tale.
Okay. Trustee Czar?
Yeah, can you go back to the map of the schools for a second?
Yes, I can.
Thank you so much. I just want to, because I want to decipher for myself and for anybody watching. Okay, so when you say, just so that we put this into like regular language for people, if you say something is critical, then that means, at least from what I heard you say when you were talking to President Moses, when you say something's critical, is that also safe to say that that means like you might be recommending that it needs to be torn down?
The two projects on it that we're recommending that would be Lowry would be replaced, and there's space to build a new and then move the students over in terms of talking about that disruption, right, and what are the added costs. So that was our recommendation on that one. And then as well for how, in terms of creating a facility, because that that current facility just doesn't work for that population, and it wasn't built to house those kids.
Okay, so Lori and Howe are the only two that
Those
you're
were
talking
the
about
two
tear downs?
on that one.
Okay, and so and then obviously a high priority means they need a lot of work.
Yes.
Right.
Well, I'm
So-
sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, Trustee Czar. How would be repurposed, not replaced? Not re-
Right, the
torn
building
down.
itself would still
Yeah.
be usable.
Correct.
That's not.
Is that what you're saying?
The building doesn't need to be demoed.
Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
the program,
Yeah.
the program should, we're recommending
the
the program has a
program be
new
moved.
facility, but the building of the
Can be
current house will-
repurposed for another.
Could be repurposed.
Program.
Purpose.
Is the land, the property, just like with Salon, or Lowry, is there enough property at the house, location to build on?
Can look and double check. I mean, there is
there is
significant
still-
property there. I know that there's been work and there's work for addition to Barry, and so there's that ongoing work.
Okay, so Lori is the only one that you're talking about demoing,
Yes.
correct? Okay. And
Or
then-
demoing all of. Some of the ones that are saying in high priority, we might recommend that a piece of the building
Sure.
is demolished. Most of these buildings have 2 or 3 or 4 additions onto them, and to have a cohesive project that really makes the needed improvements, it may be some of those are recommended to get, a small amount demolished and then an addition, but not that the whole building would be
Okay,
demolished.
so,
That's only for Lowry.
okay. Keep saying Lowry and Lori. What is
Lori.
it? Superintendent, what is it?
Lori.
Lori,
Lori.
okay, thanks, sorry.
Sorry.
It's all right, it's okay. So,
Mary Lane would disagree.
You say Lowry?
She says Lowry.
Okay, then it's Lori.
My husband
She
lives
said
in that
Lowry, but I
neighborhood,
think
and
she
he's
said it 'cause they were
76 years
saying
old.
it.
We
Yeah, I
call
was
it
probably
Lori.
right.
I think
I'll
Mary
leave
said
Lori.
Lowry, but
Lo-
probably was said, because you probably said it because they were saying it, but it's Lori, right?
Well, my husband's 76 years old, and he went to Maples and to Fort, they called it Lori.
Yeah, no, it is, I
It is Lori.
It's Lori, right? Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not wrong. Okay. All right. So then, at the end of the day, then, just in like plain English, what is the difference between these levels of priority? Is it, because you're saying, okay, you told me the critical priority might mean you're tearing down some of it, might mean not. High priority means you might be tearing down some of it, you might. So is it just a matter of money in these different priorities? Like, what is the metric that makes these different, especially between like high and critical? Like, what is the metric?
Some of it has to do with the size of the building and projected enrollments, and is there space available within
No,
the facility?
sorry, I'm not asking
Yeah.
how you got to it. I'm saying, what is the, in other words, is it enough for me to tell a taxpayer, hey, the difference between critical and high means the critical is gonna cost a lot more money? Like, what is the metric, what is the thing that makes something high or critical, the difference between the two, or moderate or whatever?
There's not one thing.
Well,
Yeah, it's probably infrastructure.
It's a combination of the
yeah.
factors that we assess. So I do think size is part of it, as we talked about how, because they just need more space. And so that kind of led it to the top. I think, at Lowry, it's like more of the condition of the building, the infrastructure. So they're all kind of ranked, all the factors that we looked at. It's not just one piece, it's kind of the picture of the building, of the story of the school. I know that's not as helpful as you might have.
No, it's not.
And this
So
was
what-
done as a ranking before and looking really sort of at the building and potential, not taking in the feedback from the community, right? So this wasn't a ranking done in conjunction with those. This was a ranking done,
No, this is just you right.
yes, right, that there's layers on top of it, as we tried to note on there.
Yeah, I still, sorry, maybe it's a me problem. I still don't fully understand. So,
No, it
What-
would be nice if
Is
there
it-
was a simple
me
to
problem?
say,
is it a me problem?
Could I interject?
Yeah.
So what are the factors that you use to prioritize these schools, with the urgency? So I heard you say structure, I heard you say capacity. What else is there that put your ranking or the priority?
With the age of the building as well came into play.
is the number one
Is the amount of infrastructure
But if the
that's
structure is
needed
good,
in the
the
building.
age does not.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm asking is, maybe I'm not asking it right. I understand the different metrics that you guys use. Okay, infrastructure, is the building, yeah,
So the-
too many kids, we need more, whatever. But I'm saying, once you come to all of that, okay, and now you've ranked it, critical or, I don't,
So the,
this, I get it, this is this, right, I get that. But I mean, once you've ranked it, if I'm gonna go talk to people about it,
Yeah.
and I said, okay, these guys told me that this one's critical, and this one's high, means, okay, so critical means like, if I'm just a layperson, it's got a lot more problems than the high priority one,
right,
which has
right.
less
My window is
problems.
broken. In the critical ones, in the critical priority, I don't have a window. It's fallen out of my house. In the high priority, my window is broken, but it's still there in my house. It does something. In the moderate priority, it really leaks cold air around my window. It's coming in. It's not, it really should be insulated or replaced, but my window is there and
Sure.
functions. And then the low priority is, I got new windows 10 years ago. I'm good for another, 20
So
years.
is it fair to say for the
That
low?
helps as a,
Sure. Is it fair to say for the low priority ones that we might be recommending at the end of the day to do very little or nothing to those buildings?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And again, back to my first question, is it fair to say that the critical priority buildings are just, I get it that they're the most in need, but does that also mean that they're going to need the most money, that particular building? Let's per square foot or per whatever? Or not necessarily?
Okay, can I interject a little bit?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
I agree, it's, the language can be confusing.
Yes.
Sometimes if you see critical, does it mean infrastructurally speaking, it has a lower timeline, a shorter timeline to be sustained the way it is? Or is it that it's critical because the amount of needs is just higher than the other buildings? So how are we defining critical? Is it that if you're gonna get to these buildings first, that's what makes them critical because their lifespan isn't much longer? Is it that? How does something fit in a category?
I think-
For, like, Salina Intermediate is considered critical, right? But new facility is not recommended. So what's critical about it? I think we need to differentiate so we can make a sound plan moving forward. Is that kind of summing up a little confusion here?
Yeah, I mean, I want to know, like.
And
for
I think the difference between Lowry and Salina, a lot of that has to do with structural
Okay, so.
questions,
So to
right?
that
And
point.
so that's where that when we look at the dollars on them, that to build, to renovate Salina would make sense because the bones of the building are
Okay.
still good.
Okay,
Whereas in Lowry, we're concerned that the bones of the building are not good and you're gonna spend so much with fixes and repairs to just the structure of it, then to renovate the inside, and to have a facility that is bigger than you need, and you're heating and cooling more area over the long term because you have all this space. You do not necessarily need a building that big for the projected, from the 2022 numbers was the projections that we were using in our study. And so that's, it's hard because you want, what's the clear message? I
Yeah,
understand that.
we need
And
clarity.
then now the critical is that it's no good for the population of students that are there. And so it is a different,
so is there a way for us to get more clarity as to why buildings are in each category?
yes.
Why they're feasible, why they're not feasible? If we can get clarity on that, because if this is open for our interpretation, we cannot then be transparent when we're telling our constituents, this is what is needed and this is why, if we're unclear about it.
Yeah, we can work on clarifying.
Trustee Aljami, but let's get Trustee Bazey's question first.
So I just wanted to, we're talking about how and the special needs population that's there. Just give me 1 second here. We got 14 classrooms that are there, and we're talking about a new facility. I just want to be clear on something, and maybe this is just my opinion at this point. It doesn't necessarily have to be a new facility. It could be something that is added onto an existing facility. I know many parents that prefer their kids go to Howe because of the social, emotional empathy that they learn there, working with that population. So I just want to be clear here as we talk about how, when we say new facility, maybe that's not the best course of action. Maybe it would be something where we build on to that building, or we move those programs appropriately, so that they are interacting with the general ed population as well. I think it's a benefit for the gen ed population and for the special ed population.
Certainly, we would agree with you 100% that it could be an addition. It could be looking at a school that has, in our report,
Extra
we
space.
comment on a school that's new that has existing space, and perhaps that can be studied, and that
program in.
that program can go to a different location with a renovation space of it.
So trustee Bazey, we agree. A standalone facility is not what we envision either. There needs to be inclusive spaces for all of our students, so.
Yeah.
A separate standalone facility is not in our vision either.
And we have several properties that can be added on to, that have enough land around them still. I mean, it's not like we have nothing available, it's just that we're limited.
And I think,
Trustee
sorry.
Abdul- You have the-
So these are good questions that we're hearing, and if there is any confusion among us as the board members, and then definitely we need clarification. Just lessons learned from the past bond that we were trying to pass. There was a lot of questions, and the reason it failed because we were not able to be clear on what we want to do and why. And even though it lost in a small number, but the trust was not there to be able to sell the bond to the community and say, this is what we're going to do. Lori is an easy sell because it's an old school, it's falling apart. But, with other schools, we have to be able to say why. Is it the HVAC system? Is it this? Is it that? Because those are the factors that you put into how critical it is and why. So we need to make sure the information is there so we, as the board, can be sold on it. Because it's hard to sell something if we're not sold on it and why. So it's really critical. And David was in the last, the VIP, the previous bond. Those are lessons learned for all of us, and most people are here, we're a part of it. We want to make sure we understand why, so that we could sell the community on it. And it has to be factual. It's like, I'm not a salesperson. So given that I'm not a salesperson, I have to sell it based on facts.
Absolutely. Trustee Subh.
Thank you. I know this was briefly discussed earlier, but I'm not sure that it was resolved or concluded. We mentioned the facilities that are listed as additional studies needed, and I know you mentioned some questions as examples. Were those questions ever presented to us? Do we have access to those? Have we been working to get you those answers so we can finish these studies? I guess I just want to learn more about that process.
No, you've not been asked those questions.
Okay.
We're not expecting answers. I think it's more so, it's a bigger picture conversation, so this is a great place to start having that.
Great.
I'll give an example, or another example. Let's say Henry Ford Elementary. We all know that school is a lot of schools pushed into one. It has 2 cafeterias. There's a lot of day-to-day challenges with how it's set up. There's a lot of room on the site. It also has a very historic building that, we don't want to tear down. It has a pool, which is so there's a lot of factors involved in the conversation before we would say for sure, yes, we're going to lop off part of the building and we're going to right size it and do this and that, because we don't think that it's an easy, straightforward answer there. I think
Sure.
there's a lot of factors involved. And so the additional study is really a lot of conversations in that case.
Sure, and I guess I'm just alluding to, how can we kick off those conversations if it's here? If you already have prepped questions for each part, I just want to, be more proactive to get that going, because the rest of this is great and we're moving along, but I don't think without that information that we can make any decision at all. So I would appreciate that. Thank you.
And a piece of the additional study is understanding priorities from the school board in terms of, and the community itself. Are you and your community really want to do a drastic change to how the schools are laid out for what in our report we call a 21st century learning, which was something that came out of the Fielding International report, right? They have one system and pedagogy on how new schools should look and be constructed. And is that a priority in Dearborn or not, right? And then that would change the study on some of these in terms of how much square footage is required, how much new we would build if we were building new. So a piece of it is looking, to understand those priorities that are put in for all of the buildings.
Trustee Zara and then Trustee Ojemi.
A quick question for Byron Fisk. Do you guys, would you recommend listening sessions, like public, whatever, listening sessions or town halls to be conducted by us within the rules of how we do meetings and all that kind of stuff? But I mean, would you, do you think that would be effective in lobbying the community to learn more about this and get more on board, maybe once after we're all on board?
I think that could be very helpful. I think community engagement, you can't do too much. In some communities we work with, you have, superintendents and board members, they do dozens of those forums out there so that there is no mistaking that here are the facts, we create multiple venues for that. So I see that as an asset once you have a proposal in mind, certainly. And if you felt like you needed to do additional listening to get to that point, I think that you would, build additional goodwill and probably get more community buy-in once you move into the sales part of the effort.
Okay, thanks.
Trustee Ojemi.
I do have a question on preservation in relation to 21st century type of setup. And I'll use an example of the school that I went to, Salina. Given the structure, the walls, would you be able to make that school a 21st century? Because one of the reason I mention that is, even though I believe in preservation, but I also believe in practical use and what's best for the kids. It just, some schools could be preserved, and not all of them could be. I mean, the Fortson of the world, yes. But the mindset should not be to sacrifice what's best as we move forward. So the question on the Salina is an example.
Yeah, we would say that yes, you can take Salina, and that's why it's not recommended there as a new building, because especially with buildings, it's actually easier with the older buildings in terms of how they are built and how their structure is to take those and to do some exciting transformations of those in terms of, say, a major renovation, and you can carve out and find the spaces that you need for student collaboration, which is a big part of creating these 21st century schools, is getting more space in there for student breakout and student collaboration areas. And we've been doing that on several projects in the Washington, D.C. area, doing that with a project with Ann Arbor Public Schools right now. And so we're very optimistic about those buildings and the transformation that you can do so that you are not giving up on saying, yeah, we're keeping the building and we we can't create great learning environments. We can keep those buildings and create great learning environments, most of them. We can keep and create great learning environments for the kids.
Is it possible to see schools in Ann Arbor, and I asked that question the last time, and as far as the Salina of the world, the walls are very thick. Yeah, they're really, and to open them up and to make them 21st century, you know, I just, and I'm not a construction guy, but I see that being an issue. But if it's done in Ann Arbor, would we be able to see a school that was renovated in Ann Arbor to a 21st century?
We have one under construction in Ann Arbor right now, and we have ones completed in the Washington DC area. I don't know if Gilbane has, and the Baltimore area. Yes, speak, Stephanie.
Sorry. In Ann Arbor, we've actually taken already many schools that, and created support spaces, have created collaborative learning spaces in existing schools that were historic and non-historic. So it's very feasible and can be done. It's not going to look like the traditional maybe plan that Fielding was looking at, but it's very close to it, and it achieves the same thing.
Because Fielding was more focused on new schools. And my understanding, or a company came in with preservation in mind. And I just don't want, I really want to do what's best versus focus on one versus the other, and not to push something that's not necessary. So that's just my statement. As far as a question on the focus group, I heard 2 focus groups, right? Did I hear the number 2 focus group?
4.
4 of them. Where were they held? And maybe there's an announcement, and I just want to know where.
These were virtual.
Oh, virtual?
Focus groups, yes. We kind of called people together in a Zoom style, and there was a moderator there, and we asked them, kind of ran them through a guide in that way. But they were all virtual.
Okay, all right. I thought it was in person, sorry, thank you.
Was any of this done in person?
The direct interviews were done by telephone, so the stakeholder interviews, the in-depth interviews were done by telephone. Those were the 45-minute interviews. The focus groups were done virtually, and of course, the poll was done also by telephone. Half of them were telephone. Half of the response, more or less, were done by text, which is pretty typical.
Go ahead.
You know, piggybacking on Trustee El-Jahmi's point about, you know, taking existing buildings and making them adequate for 21st century. You know, one thing I've noticed going to a lot of schools, especially, again, I'm going to focus on the elementary schools here, maybe because I have 3 elementary school children, and I've been in those schools and other ones as well. You know, the classrooms are small, you know, compared to what you see now. And again, to Trustee El-Jahmi's point, you know, those structures are built in a particular way. I would love to be able to see how they've taken, you know, a building with small classrooms and really expanded that. In the same breath, you have so many classrooms that are in there, and you're still going to have the same population. Were those buildings just kept the way they were additions added to them because they're going to need more classrooms? Understanding how that process works and actually being able to see it, I think, would be very valuable.
I would say, well, in terms of the middle school that we're working on in Ann Arbor, we could repurpose space that was underutilized. That's what we find in a lot of these buildings. There's a lot of underutilized space. And so part of it is finding underutilized space. The classroom size is a question or concern, and where we can take those classrooms, and that's some of the work Stephanie was talking about. Where can we fit a suite for student support services, people who need separate offices? That's one of the big needs that came up on what we were looking at, versus, you know, psychologists who work on a corner in a stage, right? Like, I think as they said, that there's really not the information out about the fantastic make-do that your principals and your teachers are doing within these school buildings to make the spaces that they need, and, you know, how can you give them really good spaces to work and educate? But so a lot of it is looking for reorganization or underutilized spaces. You know, I think discussions on cafeteria and auditorium spaces, discussions on pools and what is the policy and the priority for pools within the elementary schools, or are those spaces that are costly from a maintenance point of view and difficult, and are those spaces that could be captured for you know, a tech use, STEM space, robotic space, you know, I think, so that's from us to understand some priorities on places that are within in the existing schools.
Well, I think, you know, there may be schools that have underutilization, but I'm just going to use two examples here. Lindbergh Elementary and Henry Ford. You know, Henry Ford's projected in 10 years to have 99% utilization with no capital improvements. Right now it's at 89%, and Lindbergh is at 83 and going to 100%. And that's why, you know, I go to my point there. If we're going to go into a school like Lindbergh and make those classrooms bigger, one, we still need the same amount of classrooms, and two, utilization is just going to grow, you know? And Lindbergh, I believe, is one of the, you know, additional study needed. And to Trustee Sobah's point, you know, I think we still have questions, you know, to answer so that we can formulate, you know, a district plan.
And I think it may be being clear, which they were factored in our numbers, in terms of highlighting schools like those where we are recommending additions, right? We're not recommending a new school, but we would be recommending, based on the square footage and the population, we're recommending an addition. Or in the case of Henry Ford, that's understanding use and priorities, and does it make sense to do more of a new school and repurpose the existing for another use?
I do think that we need to start answering, you know, being able to have an understanding and answer those questions. Again, those two schools, you know, we're looking at additional study needed, high priority. Well, we need, if we're going to take action, we need to know what we need to do. So I think being able to flush out the rest of these buildings and understand, you know, have recommendations with priority, as you say, I think is an important next step.
Trustee Petrichkov?
Would it be at all helpful for us, in order to move forward and visualize better, a side-by-side comparison of a building that needs an assessment of needs and the cost differential it would be to be the renovation and whatever you're proposing versus some other option? I'm not sure what Trustee Aljami is considering when he's talking about the modernization thing, if he's talking about demoing in a new building as opposed to preserving the building and renovating it to make it a modern 21st infrastructure interior-wise.
So we've done a lot of that groundwork already. I think we were waiting to see what the report came from Byram and Fisk to understand where the dollars are at or could be at. I think one of the things that might be helpful is to do an option 1, 2, 3, 4 type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
One that is, if a certain dollar value is acceptable, what do you get if another dollar value is acceptable, vice versa? But see, this is where a little bit of the issue becomes into play, and this is where we need feedback, is where's the priority? Because, you know, a bond at a lower amount is far different than a bond at a higher amount. And so all the things that you would love to have may not be feasible in a lower. And I think these are things that, this is why we wanted to start this, right? To start having these conversations and to talk about where is the priority depending on the school. This is probably the first of a few conversations that we need to have.
And this is what we did with the last bond proposal, and we had some town halls, and we had 1, 2, and 3 options, and what are you willing to accept? When we were trying to figure out the dollar amount. And it's always, because people are always caught off guard when they actually see it in real time, what they thought it was going to cost and what it actually is going to cost is a lot different. It's like going out and buying a new car now, as opposed to when you bought a car 10 years ago and you're like, my God, how could it possibly be this amount? So we need to, in order to give direction as to what we want to start preparing for, I think that's our next phase, is trying to figure out then if the numbers you got without having any numbers, and people were saying, I'm willing to pay $25 a month as opposed to, and that's what they could stomach, so to speak, then we got a large gap of reality to fill in here about what we can accomplish and what we should be focused on and what people really want us at the end of the day. I'm still kind of perplexed as to whether the community is willing to accept, okay, we're just going to focus on the critical and the high priority right now, and we'll just not worry about these other, except for HVAC. which we've already been dedicating a lot of effort with the ESPER funds over the last, thank goodness we were able to whittle away at that to some extent. We're going to have to find out when the boots hit the ground whether they're really willing to invest in everything, or what it is that they're willing to really pay their dollars towards.
I think a few thoughts on what Trustee Petroskov is saying. I think a couple of things. One, I want to commend our district and our teachers and our administration. I think they've done a good job with the buildings and the infrastructure that they have, because we produce excellent students that go to Harvard, Ivy League schools, University of Michigan. They stay local and they do excellent things. And I think that's part of the perception. Our kids are doing great, right? And I think it's part of that falls into, we're doing what we can with what we have. But what we're also saying is what we have, we're getting to a critical point and we need to make some decisions. And I think getting out into the community and educating our district on that. Things may be great. We're doing great with what we have because we're a great district and because we have great teachers and because we have great principals and we have all of that and we're making sure we meet our kids' needs. But we have an infrastructure problem and we need to fix it, because we're going to get to a point where it's going to start affecting what we can do for these kids. And I think that's a campaign that we need to do to make sure that people understand why we're saying what we're saying. As I mentioned before, I have 3 kids in the district, and I've seen their schools. Since I've joined the board, I've gone to other schools, and I see firsthand some of these schools, walking inside, seeing the classrooms, seeing the size of the classrooms, seeing, going through these reports and seeing how all of this was built out. I think over the past 100+ years of where we've gotten to today, we've done the best that we can. Buildings built in the 1910s, 1920s, after World War II, the 1940s and 50s, building onto that. And I have some things that we can go over so you can see. When you visualize it, when you see it, when you experience these schools, I think you start to realize, wow, we have something that we need to really work on here. Additionally, a lot of times we compare ourselves to other districts. We're an older district. A lot of our buildings, I'll use Laurie as an example. Laurie was built for the city of Fortson before it was part of Dearborn. That's how old we're talking right now. Other districts are younger than us. They have younger buildings. A lot of the buildings that we have here that say critical are elementary schools, which are older. We're not seeing that on our high schools. Fortson is an older school, and we know that, but the other 2 are younger schools. They don't have as much need because they're not a building that's 100, 105, 109 years old. I think we're at an inflection point, and I think we have an opportunity to say, What do we want to do moving forward into the 21st century to best equip our students with the best infrastructure possible? Because one, we're at a point where I don't know how much longer this infrastructure can handle what we want for it, right? And two, I think our students deserve it. So I mean, I think we have a real opportunity here, and I think if we educate our district and we educate the voters and we educate the parents and we educate the non-parents about what's going on, and as we saw with some of the findings, people do want to support the schools. I think if we lay out the problems that we have and we show them the opportunity that comes, I think we can do something really great.
Well said. I totally agree that, the infrastructure state in our district is dire and that it needs immediate attention. And from my experience ever since the 2019 bond is that folks, when they give up some of their tax dollars, they want to see something. They want to see something built. One of the major reasons 2019 didn't pass is because they felt it was just fixing up or putting Band-Aids on older buildings that we cannot sustain. And it's very important that we lay down the foundation of saying, if we're going to do major renovations, this is a huge transformation to each building that's going to bring it to a 21st century standard. And if we're building a brand new building, whether it's for special education next to a regular education building, this is how much it's going to cost. And I believe I asked maybe 2 years back of how much would it cost on average to build a middle school or an elementary right now. And I'm not sure if our experts have some numbers, especially from Gilbane, as far as to build a K-8 school like Lori. What are we looking as far as a major figure?
I hope you're ready.
Go ahead, hit
High
me.
schools are averaging $750 to $800 a square foot, and that's before athletic fields, that's building alone, for new state-of-the-art high schools. Middle schools aren't too far off from that. Elementary schools are running about $550, $600 a square foot. So when we talk about new buildings and we talk about the replacement of Lori's in pretty bad shape. And it's almost the equivalent to build something new than to renovate. And renovate with a non-efficient layout, non-efficient 21st century state-of-the-art school. If you're going to spend that money, spend it on a brand new school. So when we talk about what the differences are for critical, Lori is critical, infrastructure-wise. So the rest of them, I always say, historic buildings have great bones. They were here for 100 years. They'll probably outlast all of us and our children and our children's children. That's how well they've been put together, but they need some love to maintain that. And so, I think that's why you'll see with a lot of the existing schools, other than Lori, that, a renovation probably makes more sense. And yes, they can be done into 21st century schools.
Trustee Jeremy?
The square foot number, when I was looking at the previous bond, it seemed like, and correct me if I'm wrong, right now it's around 700, and it was more around 400. Yeah. So almost doubled. Yes. So in saying that, in 20 years, if we did a bond for 30 years and allocated for a building to be done or completed in 20 years, imagine the square foot numbers. It's going to be hard to forecast what that number is going to be based on what we want to do. just because the cost is increasing so high. When you mentioned the numbers, that kind of threw me back. I'm like, wow. But I understand, things tripled nowadays.
So the increase in our construction costs really occurred since 2020. Actually occurred since 2021. We've seen a 32% increase. Well, it's actually a 45% increase in costs. 32% off of what the projections were back in 2020. So in 2019. So in 2018, 2019, 2020, there was a projection of, most schools had a projection of 3 to 4% inflation. We saw a 32% jump in inflation in 2 years. So will we see another 32%? I can't say that, but I would hope that we've leveled off for a while. But part of our issue is, we just don't have people going into the skilled trades, and skilled trades are high in demand. There's not as many out there, and materials and goods are increasingly more.
Yeah, and I was going to say material is also a big factor. But the reason I mentioned that is just to keep that in mind when we talk about a bond in long term, is the cost and the forecasting for, for building. Sometimes it's easier or better to get things done early for the critical and the urgent. And because you don't know what you don't know.
Which may make for the argument of what the community was more in preference of a split bond, and go back and tell them, look, we're going to take care of the critical needs now, but we will need to address the others, but we don't know what the cost projections will be, so we, that might be a way to, message that at some point, because we do know, we've already seen it happen with Henry Ford College, where we went out, and 2 years later, what we thought we could do with the money we had gotten put together wasn't going to cover what we had wanted originally to do, and we had to scale back our plans. So,
Great. Trustee Bazey?
I would say on that point, I think we're hypothetically throwing out, doing a smaller one and then coming back later. But I think we would need to do an assessment to say, well, what would that smaller one look like? What is that amount, right? There are needs that are so critical here, and I'm looking at some estimates that were shared, that you start adding things up and you're like, maybe it's better just to go all out. I think we're entertaining those ideas, but I think we need to do that analysis to understand what, how different is a small one versus something that takes into account everything. A question that I do have, and I know it's on the agenda, and I don't know if we're going to move to that next, but I think on the agenda we had talking about costs here, associated costs. I know is there a draft document from Gilbane about what some of this costs would be like for what we're talking about?
We don't have those costs with us today because we wanted to have a better understanding of how to structure.
Okay.
I mean, we could slice it and dice it 20 ways. I wanted to make sure it was constructive. So I think that's probably a follow-up that we need to provide based on everything we've heard today. I think it gives us a good idea of maybe what you're looking for and some information that you need to help make some better decisions.
I do have one more question.
Go ahead, Trustee Ajami.
I heard Ann Arbor is being one district that you're working on. The bond has been passed, obviously, and you're started to work. What are some of the lessons learned that would be helpful for us based on Ann Arbor?
COVID. That bond was passed just before COVID. So the thoughts and ideas that happened pre-COVID changed the thoughts and ideas of moving forward. I think one of the things that they looked at is the need to reevaluate the program every 3 to 5 years. the importance and what was needed 5 years ago has shifted. Birth rates have shifted. Enrollment has shifted. CTE programs becoming a more important part have shifted. You know, the city of pools, where, you know, they had Olympic stars come from, has shifted because pool operation is so great. They have to look at the operational costs. Things have just changed, and they will continue to change and evolve. The one thing I will say is that they made sure the buildings had the ability to be flexible. So as changes happen, the spaces are flexible for the needs. And I think that's, you know, that's probably the one lesson learned, not just Ann Arbor, but Detroit's seeing the same thing. All the districts in Michigan are looking to more flexible spaces. So as programs change and needs change, the buildings can change with it.
I think that's a challenge we might have. The need to be transparent, but also allowing for flexibility with trends if this bond is for a long period of time. So balancing that out, and earlier you said you're waiting to know what our priorities are. And I think we are trying to figure out what those are based on the scales on that graph with what makes a building determined to be high or critical or not. And I have one question. Were any of the buildings considered not feasible due to historical relevance?
No.
Okay. So it might have been a consideration, but not the main one.
Yeah, the historic was there was nothing related to the historic that would affect the feasibility in these ones.
Okay.
It might, in terms of the final decision, affect the final decision on the priorities that even though it's historic, Lowry
Right.
or something, there's reason to not keep it.
And then you mentioned for more study needed, you mentioned some indicators to consider. Could we have those listed by building? What was your determination for more study? What should we be considering in that study before making a decision?
Yeah, we can put together sort of why that went into the more study needed column.
And then were any of the buildings that were older not feasible to be new due to the acreage that site was on?
That was the main focus of not feasible because to build a new building for that population
On
with
that
the
property.
parking and the site that you would want for a new facility, and that code might require you for no facility in terms of parking and site circulation.
So a current building like Duval, for example?
Yes, that's,
That's what comes to mind?
yes, it should.
Critical or I can't keep them straight. It's high priority, but not feasible. Is that because of the land, it's landlocked?
Yeah, a new facility is not feasible, but we do think, based on the population projections and the square footage required for this 21st century learning, that the building has enough space as is, it just needs some reorganization. So we don't need a new facility to make it work. We feel like we're confident that it could be possible within the existing building. Or maybe, I know that one, for example, has an interior space. Maybe that interior space is changed and some windowed space is added for a net
Okay.
The
zero.
net zero. It has 33,000 square feet, and the projections, we would say for a 21st century school, you would want to build 33,000 square feet, right? So to take it down and put up the same square footage, one, with current building code and your site and issues, you wouldn't want to do that. there, but you would want to look at reconfiguring that square footage.
Thank you.
So can,
No, go ahead. I just hit your mic.
oh, okay. So I'm just gonna kind of piggyback on that. We talked about Duval, and I'm looking at the report here. Duval has a 78% utilization, going to 72. I can understand reutilizing space and all that. But another school that falls into this is Maples, not, new facility, not feasible, 83% utilization, jumping up to 89. And that one, when you look at the lot size, I mean, I can understand why you can't, doesn't seem like you could build a new building on the same property while you do that or extend it or such. But I think that alludes to, we still have questions about these, you know? And understanding, you know, what does new facility not feasible for one school mean as it is for another one? And I think that'll help, you know, inform the administration, you know, as we move forward with, you know, our suggestions about what plans a board would want put together, you know.
And I think we have in our report, and I was probably in error earlier in saying that not feasible has to do with the size of the site.
So that's why it's not feasible.
So
just because of
that's
the
why
size.
they're not feasible because of the size of the site. And so if you were going to do a new Duval or new Maples, you really need to look for 7 to 12 acres somewhere to,
So I know, in the executive
Build
summary, it explains that, but then that makes me look at, and that's kind of my assumption walking into this. Okay, Maples doesn't have the size, but Maples has needs.
and the recommendation is to look at addition, is there a targeted small addition to take care of the growth in population? Again, what's the priority on the pool and that square footage at Maples? And is that targeting something? And so that's where we could delve in very deeply to a specific school, which I think your community may want as you start to sort out the bond numbers and the direction.
I'm sorry to interrupt, President Mosop. I did promise Mark Fisk here, they do have another commitment later this evening, so I did promise them that they would get out by 8. If you or any other members of the board had a question for them, I'd wonder if we could address that at this time.
Yeah, any questions for this? Yeah, Mr. Bazey?
Question, in your experience with working with schools and helping them pass successful bonds, is the approach first typically to pick an amount and then see what you can do with that amount, or more of a, here's what the community wants, this is how much it's gonna cost, and then working that way?
I think you could do it either way, because those are linked. What you decide to pick is obviously going to impact the cost. But the typical process is starting with either a couple of specific proposals. We did not do that here. We were intentionally not specific, but to find a specific proposal, and honestly to do additional research on that proposal, to gauge public interest in it, to gauge how far, then you're getting into, this really is going to cost you X number of dollars a month. It's not theoretical anymore. It's not if this, then that. So starting with a specific proposal and then doing research on that piece of it is typically the path that we have taken before.
Okay, thank
Does
you.
that make sense? I would also say, just for what it is worth, that the residents, the voters, you all know this because you all talk to them all the time. They're very busy and they're in a very cluttered environment. And so you want to be accurate, you want to be factual, of course, but simplicity is the key. A lot of districts, they start getting into discussions about school finances and amortization tables and pie charts, and you lost. This is about 2 or 3 very important ideas. You articulate it well, the vision for the future for our kids. It doesn't have to be, you have to have a place where all the information is, but simplicity is the key because folks are they're bombarded with information and they're so busy right now. So my counsel to you, if you decide to go there, is keep it very simple, keep it accurate, and be as transparent as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm only going to ask these just in case, Mark and his team have anything to do with these. Some of the asks that we talked about, throughout the meeting. One of them is the forecast enrollment. This is something that I would like to see because the impact of virtual and loss of students. So in order for us to make a decision, and I'm not sure if, your team does that or somebody else, I would like to ask that we reach out to Ann Arbor and as a district and gain lessons learned from them. I think this is really important because they just did it. I know they're having a lot of challenges. So based on the changes, based on so many things, so that's also the capital improvement timeline, which shows, when we get to that, which shows the benefit to the taxpayer. Because, if we say, and I said that earlier, but I'm repeating, if we say in 20 years we're doing a new building, that's not a benefit to somebody that might not be in Dearborn in 20 years, they might be moving to Florida. So we want to show the timeline, the capital improvement timeline with benefits, for the taxpayers. The only reason I brought that up before you leave, especially for the forecast of enrollment, to me that's important with regard to capacity, and I think it impacts the high school only, for the most part. But it's just something that we would want to know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Happy New Year. Appreciate you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
It didn't sound like.
Just want to echo that too. Just remember, right now, everything is paid out of the general fund. The state does not give us any money for infrastructure. They have just now they just finished a study on the energy savings and infrastructures, and they came up to, $1.3 billion need for Dearborn. So just so you know, these numbers that we're talking about for a long-term plan are not unheard of. They've been kind of independently tested as they went through this process. They've only given a little bit of funding for this coming school year. Roughly, they would recommend maybe $1 million for us. So just don't think the state's going to solve our infrastructure problem. So it's really a district-level decision of how they want to handle this. And obviously, I don't have to mention the urgency, because as things go on, anything that happens is going to get funded from the general fund, which puts a pressure on our operational program. You have staffing models, and the more highly paid, the less staff you have, lower paid, the most staff. So it has to come from somewhere if we have a crisis. And as you see in all your board agenda items, there's always a contingency on most contracts, because we don't know what's going to happen. We got to have that flexibility, even if you make a decision that you were going to just focus on the high priority items. We got to have a contingency, because something that's in a high priority, even low priority, if the boiler disappears, not much is air conditioning, but even heat is a big issue for us. Some of our buildings are down, normally have 2 boilers, one's already down. And we've been limping along on one, but we're just one crisis away. So I just want to make sure you understand that some of these studies that you would like to have, it's just like the decisions we make all the time. We're limited information on how we can make our decision. Some of these studies may take 3-6 months to do, to get the community involved, get an idea out there, get feedback, remodel it. So you can't have it all planned out. And if you wait till you have it all planned out, we're a couple years down the line. And then who knows, a couple years down the line, maybe we have a large influx of students. We never know all the decisions. So you can't be perfectly and have all decisions made, knowing that we can only do so much construction in a given year. Some of these decisions, like even on the high priority schools, we can't get to all of them. It's going to have to be worked on and get to that decision of what to do with some of those, but we got to make sure we're doing something to get this ball rolling.
If I could, so we do believe in the bond, but we also want to make sure we do it right. And some of the things we have to consider, we've been very negligent with regard to the virtual and the Penn Foster. The district has not done anything to, we're losing kids. And if we don't take that into consideration, if we're trying to expand a building, if we're trying to, add more classrooms, I know 4 kids that played in my basketball program that are in Penn Foster. So we have to consider those things and take that into consideration. We do believe in the bond. We are very supportive of the bond, and we know we need the bond. Now, the question is, how much do we need? is the major question. And the timeline of when those things can be done. If it's the urgent, the critical, and they could be done right away, we're in support. Because we do want to make sure the environment, the building that we provide for our kids are the right buildings. But I also, if we're looking for a large bond, I wish we would go for the Cadillacs. Like, what's the wow factor that we're trying to bring to the city? What is it that are we, building a building to handle our special needs kids, a central location to do that? What are we doing that is so different from just upkeep? Like Lori, it does need to be replaced, but I just don't want to go through the same process as Ann Arbor, because if you talk to them, there's challenges. And so we do believe in the bond. So the question is the amount. The last time we did it was $244 million or $240 million. This is going to be much, much bigger. It's in the billion range, plus. So I want to make sure that we don't allocate something for 20, 25 years, in the timeline. I want to address the needs that we need to have now and in 10 years, because we don't know what's going to happen in 20 years, 25 years. So I just don't want it to come across that we're being, asking all these questions because we don't believe in the bond, because we do, and we're very supportive. But there's some things, and I'll say this, when we did the 2019, I think 2019 or 2021, I was on the VIP committee, and I was one of the people pushing for Fortson to be increased. Hindsight's 2020. Now Fortson is losing kids. It's 1,900 kids. And I project it in the future to be 1,500 kids. This is my own observation. At this rate with virtual schools. So, if you guys would have listened to me 2019, you would have added to Fortson. So we need to make sure that we know what our enrollment is, or it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to take 6 months, but we need to take that into consideration. Or maybe talk to our lobby to talk to the state about Penn Foster. Kids are graduating in 3 months.
And that's probably, it's not the only reason, but a 4-year degree, a 3-year degree can't compare with a 3-month degree. So there's some things out of our control. Is infrastructure one of the reasons students are leaving? I would probably say no. So although it'll affect the trend in population with how much space we need, besides that, I would say it's probably a separate conversation, a necessary one, that's separate from an infrastructure conversation.
But it's the count that we're talking about.
It is the count, and also.
My focus is not on the.
Sure.
On virtual, and I'm not trying to sidetrack the meeting, but what I'm
Right.
saying is the number of kids we're losing.
Right.
If Fortson is going to be eventually 1,500 kids.
Right.
At this rate with virtual school, we need to consider that.
Well, absolutely, and I'm excited to share that we're also looking at our CTE programs that we're adding because of that as well. We need to engage more students. We need to provide more programs that will keep more students in our system versus going to a virtual program. And that's another necessity of the bond, of a potential bond. So not only is it students going full-time to virtual programs, we also have students who are hybrid right now that we have to consider in addition to that, that are going from one building to another. And so that affects population, and that decreases it in terms of what we need in our current building. So there's a lot of factors that we're also weighing in as far as student trends and population. But yeah, so I understand Penn Foster is I won't even call it competition because I don't think it is, but it's a reality that students are choosing for whatever reasons. I also am hopeful that, and some students have come to me and said, I went that route and I regret it, and now what do I do? So let's hope that that trend also reverses when they realize that it's not providing them a successful future.
I don't think the trend will reverse. just my personal opinion, we disagree. But my focus is on the population loss to our, if we say Fortson is going to be this number, then there's no reason to expand. That's the justification of expanding. There's no reason to expand if the number of kids are going to go down. Like you said, the virtual schools discussion, that's a side item, but I don't want the district to be very dismissive of it.
No.
And say it's not a competition, because if we're losing our kids to an inferior product,
Right.
we should care enough about doing something about it.
Absolutely.
To Trustee Ajahami's point, just looking through all the reports here, and I've kind of put them together in a spreadsheet, none of the reports recommend expanding Fortson.
Yeah.
Just renovating.
I'm just giving an example that we have to consider the population.
School by school.
The school population in order to be able to, we need to forecast. Because in order to build, it's based on the needs. It's, virtual schools and charter schools, and what are we forecasting for? If we're saying we're gonna expand a school, even a middle school, if the forecast doesn't say that we need that. Remember, during the previous one, there was a forecast. There was numbers in there, but I don't see it for this one. If you go into the website, it shows you the 2019, the forecast, also the population, there was a lot of information, even population growth and so on. So I don't know if we missed it this time.
No. So the Quinn Evans report does have
There-
projections for 2032.
Yeah, there was projections we were given.
We used the study that had been done in 2022. So a study previous to us was done on the projections from 2022 to 2032. So you had projection study done in 2022.
That's the number I saw.
And those are the numbers that we used. So your point, if they're out of date, right?
Yeah, so what I saw is the 2022.
Yes.
So we saw the same thing, but, things have changed a lot.
Well-
and they're changing a lot.
But I'm looking at a report here that has projections of student population out to 2030 that we were given. It was in the file
From
with all the
2020.
other, from Cropper. Dearborn City Schools demographics.
But the projection was in 2022, and they projected 2030 at that time, which is, so over the last 3-4 years, there's been a dramatic change in, in a lot of things. So things have changed. So what they projected for 2030 is from 2020. It's like right now, I
Well,
project.
yeah, and you're not going to get much closer data, probably.
Sorry, how difficult and time-wise, money-wise, is it to do another
We-
projection?
We can do another.
Right.
Our student
we
service
just-
office does enrollment projections all the time.
Right.
We also work with 2 other companies that can do enrollment projections, and we can have that done for the board again, so that we can get more accurate numbers and more up-to-date numbers to see. Obviously, there has been changes in enrollment in the state since 2020. It is a statewide a problem of there are less students in the state of Michigan. And for a district that has had over 30 years of enrollment growth, to see us finally stabilizing and unfortunately losing some students to an inferior program is definitely a concern, and something that needs to be addressed and something that we can look at. So I think that, having an up-to-date enrollment forecast done, we can do that. It's not too difficult. Like I said, and hats off to Mr. Mashur, who has done them in the past. His accuracy is incredible. So we can do that, but then we also do outside services that do enrollment projections to verify those numbers.
And just so I can say that for the most part, what we're talking with the infrastructure needs don't necessarily focus on the student population in each building. It's focusing on actual physical maintenance issues of these buildings and survival of these buildings as they stand today, not necessarily a lot of additions are being included in those conversations. So I'm not as concerned about what the population is going to look like for Fortson or Dearborn High, because we're not talking about additions as much as we're talking about making sure we can renovate and sustain healthy buildings. And that's where I think our priorities and focus should be when we go out to the community. One of the things I will say that that I've been hearing once again, and it was kind of what the problem was with the 2019 bond, to be quite frank, is that people are saying, you've had all this money all these years, what have you been doing with it? Why haven't you been maintaining these buildings or fixing them up and everything? You've got lots of money, and you're not utilizing it correctly. So we once again, and Byron Fisk mentioned that there's a trust issue of how we spend the money. And people presume that if you've got a budget of yay big, that you should have plenty of money to take care of boilers and roofs and all these things. And I think we need to start early before we even get the bond proposal of once again exposing what we've already spent money on and what the structural needs are, and start getting that information out in a manageable way so that people can start to see the reality, because clearly they weren't seeing it. And they think that either everything is fine and we're asking for money for, TV sets and whatever, and not real physical renovations, and or that we've wasted a lot of money in the past and we haven't done what we should have been doing with it then, because they're not there, they don't see the concrete realities inside these buildings. So if we have any way and any opportunity to start getting that message alongside of and this is why we need, it might help curtail that what sunk the last bond, which was people who didn't believe that we were being honest with what we needed the money for and what we were going to do with it.
I want to.
Bear with me, gather my thoughts, or try to bring them. I think there's a disconnect here. There are a few disconnects here, no disrespect to anybody. I think we're all making good points. But I'll start with, I've heard a few asks from, let's say, each party, the board, administration, and from our consultants. But, where's our starting point is a good place to start. What are our action items? And how do all of these reports, all of these considerations and factors tie into each other? I think the disconnect is when we talk about things like population, or we talk about things like infrastructure, or we talk about our future, or what the classroom looked like. I think these all connect with each other, and I think we are looking at and considering these all very individually. So I'll just, not to refute your point right now, but just to say, population could matter if we are looking to do 21st century classrooms, which include larger classrooms, more breakout rooms, 2 cafeterias instead of 1. I think population plays a factor in determining that as part of infrastructure, no? So I think all of these things need to be connected, and I think we are just not connecting them at some point, or maybe we will eventually. Especially or additionally talking about schools or facilities that have additional studies needed. We talk about what our priorities are, what is our vision. If our vision and priority now change, let's say it might be changed from whenever this was last given, does that not change the outcome of all the other facilities as well? A lot of 21st century, renovation or school has been mentioned, but what does that look like exactly? What does that entail? How do we then balance priority of I need AC versus I want 21st century, et cetera? And so again, I just think at some point we need to start connecting all of these dots to make the decision or to help move along as to what Mr. Wall was saying earlier. I do agree that, we have some urgency, but again, everything is happening in a silo, and I would like somebody to help start facilitating and connecting them. Thoughts?
Is it a good time to go through this? Should we go through? We think it would be a good time? Yeah. Can we bring this up?
Sure.
So to Trustee Soba's point, over the past couple, over this break, going over a lot of these documents, I've come to the same conclusion. What do we got to do to move forward, right? I think a lot of us are saying the same thing. What do we got to do to move forward? So I've kind of just put together, some of my thoughts into a presentation. I'll go quickly in the beginning. We'll get to next steps through it. But, a lot of what we're doing is based on decisions that we've made on these studies that we've been talking about. Where are we now? I don't know if we can.
Yep, we're getting it up there now.
Okay. Right now we have 20 elementary and K-8 buildings, 5 middle schools, 3 high schools, 3 specialty buildings, 3 administrative buildings. You can see right now 34 buildings, over 3 million square feet, almost 400 acres in the city of Dearborn. In 3 years, 12 of our buildings will be over 100 years old. Now, to the point, just because they're 100 years old doesn't necessarily mean that we have to take all these buildings down, but we have work that we need to get done. 17, or about 50% of them will be 80 years old, and nearly three quarters will be 70 years old. So, again, I had mentioned earlier, Lori, was built in 1927. If you look at the news article that came out with there, and I think it's a pride point for us in here in the city of Dearborn, meeting our kids' needs. It had, I believe, an orthopedic department, and they were, doing work with special needs kids there and make sure they meet their needs there. And I think over 100 years, Dearborn has done that, and we need to look forward about what we're going to do to continue to do that. Moving on, you can see, a lot of the spaces, and I don't want to, go over a lot of what we already said, but a lot of the spaces were made for education, delivering education in the 1900s. You can see here as an example, if we can move a couple slides, the one that says Duval Elementary, how, piecemealed some of these buildings have been kind of doing what they need to do to meet those needs, right? These spaces initially were for the boom that came to the area with the Rouge plant and all of that. We're talking about that history. That's where we are today from those beginnings. If we move to the next slide, you can see Whitmore Bowles, one of the buildings that have critical needs, have been addressed as a critical priority. You can see it's piecemealed with 4 renovations, additions after the 1927 build. We're doing what we need to do to meet our district's needs, right? We move over to Salina, you'll see a similar thing there, 1921, 1927, 1951, and then most recently in 2003. So what do we do moving forward, right? So if we can move over to there, right there. A lot of what we have pulled together and questions that we've had, and more questions that we have today, kind of deal with the foundational instructional needs, right? So if we can move over one slide. Much of that analysis has been completed. You have a note there at the bottom. We have questions today. Additional needs need to be done. But some priorities that we hear from residents, like we've already said, update safety and security, modernizing mechanical and HVAC, equity of spaces and services provided. As we grow these out, making sure that these spaces are equitable across the district. As we move on, the next pieces that I think we need to start to address is, okay, we have these infrastructure needs. How are those infrastructure needs working? Are we doing, are we focusing on larger classrooms, and what are those going to look like? Are we having larger classrooms because we need more push-in services? And a lot of times we think of a classroom and we have kids in there with a teacher, but you have adults in there now too. When I grew up, it was me and the teacher, and that's what it was. Now you go in there, you have parapros, you have coaches that come in, you have, a lot that happens in that classroom. You need the space. When me and Trustee Aljami went to Lori to see how coaching was being implemented, you stand in there and the kids are right there, and I had to step back and want to give them that room. A lot of these rooms are tight. What are we going to do now when we build out this infrastructure to meet all of those needs? As we move on to the next slide, our special populations, making sure these building layouts are. Part of the reason how is a problem is because you have wheelchairs in the hallways, and you have kids coming down that are in wheelchairs or other devices. You can't have 2 people coming down at the same time. Even if we move them to another school, are those buildings built to meet our current needs? You know, and I'm highlighting special needs here. If we move on to the next slide a little bit, I mean, we have 70 specialized classrooms. We've made those specialized classrooms within the infrastructure of buildings that were built in the 1900s, the sizing of that. This is where my mind goes. Not only are we talking about basic infrastructure, but what are we doing to meet all of these needs for general ed and special ed? Modernized and expanding CTE, we keep hearing about that. Dedicated room for art and music. You know, we'll go to schools, you know, if we can move to the next slide, art on a cart, because there is no art room, right? Or you have, you know, a learning coach, or, you know, a specialty teacher or personnel that was put into a closet room because that's the room that we have, you know? So I know we're talking about basic infrastructure needs and we're doing all this, but what are we envisioning for the future to make sure that we are meeting the needs of these kids? And if we go on to the next slide, the AI revolution is here. What skills do we need to make sure we equip these kids with? We need to rethink what the careers of the future are going to be. You know, a lot of times we look at what do we have and what are we going to do. Let's open ourselves up. What is the future, and then do we do it with what we have, or do we need to expand? Do we need to build out? Do we need to build new buildings? Simulation labs, coding and robotics, audio, video, media resources, AI-powered learning. These are just suggestions, just a few things. Where I'm getting to this is, and again, this is my suggestion, and I'd like to discuss this. And it kind of piggybacks on what the Fielding study has, these 4 master plans. Fielding took an approach of going from keeping all the infrastructure that we have to centralizing everything, right? And there is something to be said about that. And this kind of, as you see here with these 4 proposals, Proposal A is we keep our footprint as it is, 3.3 million square feet, over 400 acres. Proposal B is, do we consolidate our high school and leave our, you know, neighborhood elementary and middle school distribution? Or do we do some sort of consolidation or reconfiguration at the elementary and middle and keep our 3 high schools and specialty centers? Or do we consolidate on both sides? You know, I think an approach to this, if we can move to the next slide, taking those 4 plans, working with the administration for them to be able to put those together, those times would have what that new building footprint would look like, timelines for those, budgets for those. If we wanted to move fast, slow, you know, can we implement this in 10 years? What would that look like from a cost perspective? Can we implement this in 15 years? What would it look like from a cost perspective? That way we understand, number one, how these are laid out with the different options, what we think is best to deliver education, right? Or what, you know, what we get from our experts in the administration. And then we review that, we say yea or nay, and then we take that out to the community. We get the community's feedback on that. Do we want to stay 100% neighborhood school system? Do we want to centralize our high school? Do we want to do some consolidation or reconfiguration of elementary and middle school? What are the benefits, the pros and cons? You take all of those 4 plans and you boil that down to 1 plan. Board initial approval, take that back out to the community, right? And I think we'll know, we're talking about selling a plan. We're taking their feedback. We're putting it into it. This is what the community wants. We don't have to sell them on something. We're taking what the community wants and putting it forward and giving them a solution for those needs. I think there is an educational piece, as we learned today, of making sure people understand what our infrastructure issues are. And I think that has to be part of this campaign. But as you go through these steps, and it's outlined here in 12 steps, we get to a point where the ballot is put out and proposed. I think another thing we need to do, and to Mr. Wall's point here, we have to look at a timeline. We can move over to the next slide. You know what, we can go over, let's go over to 2 more slides proposed, where the one that has the vote image on it. When we look at timelines, we look at when ballots can be presented to voters. We have November 3rd of this year. We have May 27th of May of 2027, November of 2027, February of 2028. I think those are timelines that we have to look at. Those are hard dates that we have to consider. But going back to having those 4 plans, how do we look at a timeline and say, we're going to develop 4 plans. We're going to make sure that they're vetted as much as they need to be. We're going to bring that to the board for them to look at with these various options, right? Then we're going to take that out to the community. have the community give their feedback on that, boil that down to one plan, have a definitive timeline of what we know we can do, how much it could cost, where it could go, and it kind of gives direction and also informs the community as we go, why we're doing what we're doing, when we're doing it, how we're doing it. And I think, and I don't know if we would do that tonight or not, but I think I would like to discuss, these are the dates that we have to look at. And what do we need to take out to the community, budget-wise, plan-wise, and what the community wants, and hit one of these available ballot dates. Because we go beyond that, I mean, our infrastructure is in urgent need, and we need to take action. So I suggest, having a conversation around that, the suggestion of master plan options, or how we execute that and give direction to the administration so they can start getting to work on putting that together, answering questions that we still have. We have questions, we need to answer them. And then putting together a plan, something where, here you go, here's plan A, here's plan B, here's plan C, here's plan D, here's what they look like. And then what are we taking from that, if it's all of them or some of them, out to the community and boiling that down to one plan? Are we talking about, there's doing something smaller and it could be maintenance related, right? It's gonna be a much smaller thing. Or are we envisioning the future, right? Are we envisioning the next 50, 75, 100 years? If I were to say we have 400 acres and there's no buildings, what would we do for Dearborn schools to make it this district that we want? I know that's very ideal. We do have 38 buildings that are there, but sometimes we limit ourselves within what we have, trying to accomplish what we need. What do we think is best for the future? And now, what buildings can accomplish that? It's more of a Cadillac plan, like Trustee Aljami had mentioned earlier. But I think it's worth the discussion. I think it's worth the planning, and I think we can do it. And I think we can. I don't think we'll have to sell it to the residents. I think that we can put a plan together with their input, and everybody will be on board. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
Thank you, Trustee Badley, for putting that together. I'll open up to any questions for him on the suggestions. But I do believe that, with those kind of timelines, we still have some, I believe, election times, other than those that you put on. So, might be primaries in 2028.
So that's the last one, February 22, 2028, primary.
Yeah, so, yeah, definitely. The question is, we're at crossroads as far as if we want to go with the smaller bond and just go attack the most highest priority items, or whether we go for the grand idea of this is what we want to do and touch all of the buildings. And that is something that we definitely need to decide on. Obviously not tonight. Many of the questions that were posed today need to be answered as far as the questions about replacements. There needs to be more also, even if we present multiple options, I believe it is worthwhile that we present those to the community in some kind of form of getting the pulse of where can you afford? Because affordability is a huge thing. I mean, whether here or New York or anywhere else, we can dream of the best buildings possible for our students, best learning spaces that will bring us the 21st century modern AI-powered coding labs that you spoke of, but that will have to come with a price and a cost that we would have to say, where is that middle point where we could say we could afford this, but at the same time we could deliver all of these things, or deliver some of these things that the residents are asking.
I would just also, I hate to be cautioning again, but in 2019, we had done a lot of town halls to try to explain and give options and get feedback, and it still failed because of some misinformation, some misinterpretations of information, whatever you want to call it. You can do all the best you can in thinking that you're getting the pulse of the community, and you can still miss the mark. And I don't know how many times we can continue to go out to the community with a plan and have it miss the mark, because at some point, the
Well,
message is
not
pretty
expecting
clear.
everybody to
Yeah.
have the buy-in. but
Right.
For sure, you will have people who will oppose anything. that
Oh,
we
30% is a general rule
Right,
for
so,
any,
but it has to be something that is within range, that people are very comfortable with, and have a buy-in. They feel like this is something that they actually,
but it's hard to, you think you're hearing from people and you're not always hearing from people. You know, you think you've hit
well,
all the
we do,
audience.
we do what we can.
Yeah.
Right? What is in our place, what is in our power, in order to put up a bond like this. So, Superintendent Saror, do you have everything that
I have
you
it
need?
all down. Yes.
And it's been recorded.
Yes.
But I'm saying as far as to move forward, I'd like to also,
Yeah.
and this is some of ask, and I'll open it up also for questions. You know, if we can get some kind of proposals together that we, to the board, to say, this is what we can do with a $500 million. This is what we can do with a full $1 billion. This is what we could do with 1.5 billion. And we gauge that priority chart as far as, you know, Lori will be replaced with this kind of plan, or we can have a special ed facility with this plan. Some kind of options
Right.
with associated costs, with numbers next to them. Obviously, we have already the numbers there. And also, how long that will take. Will it take 10 years, 15 years to get to that? I know we keep saying 30 years, but most of the work will happen in the next 10, 15 years. But we will be paying for this project for 30 years, similar to 2002 and previously. I actually went back to the historical aspect of how did these schools come to be about, and former trustee Bugaya told me that, you know, they, at one point, they were doing one building at a time, what they can afford at the time. And it might be a good idea to also look at that. If we want to say, we want to just replace Lori for now, and everybody in the city will take that cost to replace that school, if that is the majority, let's go that route. But I believe everybody wants to have a piece, at least to their neighborhood school, something that could be done, and obviously paying attention to the most dire needs in our schools.
I think we are on our way to being prepared for that. Every department has a needs list. I think a driving question for us is going to be, what do we consider a want versus a need? And does the community agree with us? Is innovation a want, or do they see it as a need? Is expanded CTE a want, or do they see it as a need? I would say they see it as a need now, based on the feedback. So these are the questions we need to continue to ask the community. And I would like technology, special ed, early childhood. All of these departments have a needs list that includes district-wide changes and then also individual building needs as well. So that's categorized based on what you just said. What does everybody need and is getting? And then what do individual buildings need based on the recommendation of a new build or an improvement or an as-is? So we're ready after we get some clarity on some of that information that I know we'll get very soon. We're on our way to being prepared to propose these 4 proposals for you or create them.
Trustee Sobe?
I don't know if this was implied, Superintendent, interim superintendent. Will we be sending out or doing another survey type, I guess, to get these answers of a want versus a need?
I think,
innovation?
okay, so I think based on the survey results
Yeah.
and the ranking of what they consider to be most important,
Yeah.
I would interpret that as them seeing those as needs. Now,
I get it.
that's my interpretation. Do we use that information to create these proposals? I think we're safe to do so.
Sure.
but then go back out to the community and say, this is what we believe we heard from you. Is it accurate? What changes do we make from here? But I do feel confident we have enough information from the community to begin creating these proposals.
Okay, and I only ask because if so, I would like to use that as an opportunity. I don't know, and forgive me if it was there, if we had asked opinions on, you know, the neighborhood schools and.
Yes,
to
that's
get-
in the fielding, I believe there, and this is where maybe back to what you said, trustee, there's, we thought we knew, but we didn't know. There were some very divisive questions that people felt strongly about. And, yeah, you know, it goes back to, what are we proposing? How do we rationalize it?
Yep.
And how do we explain the why?
Yep,
And that goes back to some of my questions regarding historical significance. How much does that play a role? How much should it?
yep,
Are we, to what trustee Al-Jahmi said, are we looking in the past to plan our future? Is that the responsible thing to do? How much should we weigh things like that moving forward?
yeah, appreciate
So
it.
I think we do have a lot of background information. We have a lot of community input. And like our data and our plans, that's also changing. So yes, going back out is important. But I would say after we create an initial proposal.
Great, thank you so much.
So few months, we're good?
Well, I mean, on that point, talking about time,
joking.
well, we're talking about timeline, though.
Yeah.
You know, there's November 3rd up there, and I have in the presentation here kind of, if that's what we're going to be doing, I don't know if we want to back up a couple. I didn't number these, sorry. I don't know who's back there, but, is it you, right there?
Me.
Let's go to timeline 1, thank you, sir.
Which, one?
Timeline 1. So the other timelines, I think, the way I've envisioned it, give a lot of time for that community feedback, right? But for this one, there's a key point that we have to reach. The ballot language has to be submitted to the state of Michigan with a ballot amount. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Tom, May is when we have to hit that for this year, correct?
If we want to have the state backing for their credit rating.
Yes.
Otherwise, we dare encourage additional costs if we want to bond it ourselves. It's not a large cost for us because we're a large district, but a smaller district, it might be cost prohibitive. But for a larger district, it's not. The true deadline is mid-July, where we have to submit it to the county to put it on the ballots.
Okay.
If we want state credit, it adds a level of, you know, clarification. The state's going to ask for all the detail, but it's not required.
Okay. So then, I mean, I think that's another milestone that we need to take into consideration. When we're putting this together, could we do what we think is best, you know, putting together, you know, plan options, getting those reviewed, getting the community input, boiling it down to one, and you know, coming down to a budget amount, all in a time where it's adequate to be able to get it submitted appropriately. You know, if it's something that's feasible within, you know, timeline 1, fantastic. If it's not, I think we have those other options. But I think sooner than later, I think being able to decide upon that or see where that's pointing to would be good.
Trustee Al-Jahmi.
I think from a timeline perspective, keep in mind, Trustee Bazey, this was discussed last year, and it was pushed till this year to be on the ballot. So we have pushed it from last year to this year because of some of these questions that we have. And I think the preference is to do it this year, if possible, based on our discussions last year. Now, if it's not practical, I would not want to push something that's not practical. But just to give you a little historical background on the objective was to do it this year based on us talking about it last year.
Voter turnout, right?
Yeah, and I think we were just not ready at the time when we were discussing it at the end of the year. We were not ready. So I think there's definite needs to have the bond. There's questions that needs to be addressed. And it really depends on, you know, the type of bond. Is it a small bond? Is it a big bond?
Correct.
And what we want to do. If it's a smaller bond, and I'm not saying we don't need a big bond, I just want to do a disclaimer. If it's not a big bond, then it's possible to do it, in my opinion, on the 3rd. But if it's the big bang, where we want to do everything that we want to, because a lot of times it's hard to go back and forth with bonds, and maybe the time, and I think Tom and David and Lamise, maybe the timing based on, where we are with the millages, that plays a factor on it. How does it impact the voters based on the millages and what we have right now versus, so that it doesn't impact them greatly.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask a question, Tom, and I don't mean to, if you can't answer this now and we have to come back to it, I think it would be good. Okay, I'm sorry. Can we go to this one? Yeah. So you'll see here for each of the timelines, the second bullet point. I think another thing we have to take into consideration, assuming a passage at each one of those, when do the funds become available so we can start work?
It usually takes about a month to make sure it's certified, and then about 2 months after that to develop a prospectus that we actually developed that talks about our current financial condition, what the bonds will be used for. That usually takes about 60 days to get through the legal process, and then you would actually collect the money. So about a 90-day window to collect the money.
But now, so it wouldn't be dependent on when this hits summer tax bills? This would,
Well, normally our construction period is the summer.
okay,
Now, obviously, anything we do of large scale, like the plans to develop a new, like say, a new middle school, will take many months, and maybe they can answer better than that, but you have to actually develop the whole plans, and get it through the state, which is very troublesome these days, because they're very short-staffed to get something approved. And so you're probably looking at least 18 months before you can actually start construction on a middle school.
okay. So 18 months from one of these dates of passage.
Correct. Now, it doesn't mean we couldn't do parking lots, roofs. Those are much smaller and less complex, but a new school will take quite some time.
So I think one of the questions he's kind of alluding to is, so when would the taxpayer see it show up on their tax bill?
The tax bills are done. We submit our tax bills in May for both the summer levy and the winter levy. Usually, the cities like to have it by June 1st. Obviously, we push that a little bit, but mid-June is when we submit the bills to this.
So if they passed a bond in November of this year, they would see it on their summer tax bill
Correct.
of 2027.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that for the May election, as an example, we could do a winter levy, but most people aren't planning for that.
Right.
Because, obviously, a lot of people have mortgages and they have a tax escrow. It would cause a lot of cash flow issues for taxpayers if you did the larger bill on a
In the
winter
winter,
levy, because we don't normally do
which is
that
in
for the city of
February.
Dearborn.
So
Dearborn Heights
if-
is 50/50.
so the May one, they wouldn't see it on their tax bill till the following,
The
May
other,
of till May
Well, we would have to,
Summer of
2028. Yeah.
right, and we would have to modify
Right.
the tax table. You're gonna pay more interest for the district, because you're gonna wait another cycle to start paying. So increase the interest cost a little bit, but it's feasible, yes.
so can we safely assume timeline one, assuming passage, summer 27, that's the first time taxpayers will see a new
If you
tax
do a
on it?
November election.
Yep. The other three would, I'm assuming, summer of 28.
Right. Obviously, it'd be more cost to the district, but we wouldn't want to, impair the cash flow of our taxpayers because of the unexpected levy in the winter.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I need some clarification on the proposals, like the question you asked, how am I determining needs versus wants? Because that'll determine scale. And I responded to you, I'm going to use the survey results as a needs assessment. Is that okay with you? Because that's going to affect the price tags. I need to know, are we looking at a needs proposal? But how are we defining needs? You mentioned the Cadillac model, but is the Cadillac the new Honda? So there's a lot of things that we need to really clarify, not to make it a joke, but or do you want two options that are driven by price or amount? And maybe you don't want to answer that today, but a little more clarification with,
Well, as far as needs,
yes.
when you say needs, is that
beyond safety and infrastructure.
Right.
Yes.
Is that coming from school principals? Is that coming from school engineers?
We
'Cause
have that
They're gonna
data.
check needs for everybody.
Well, that's really, if you can remind me, the way we did the feedback before
Right.
was, what's a need to have, what's a nice to have. So there, it was categorized.
Okay.
We have things categorized.
All right.
So what category am I looking at?
Well, can we assume that the Quinn Evans assessments would be the needs category? Because they're not living in those buildings, so they don't have a want as opposed to what
Sure.
they thought. And then the wants would be anything outside of?
Yes, yes. And if we look at trustee Bazey's pyramid, I think it helps with that, although I would consider the whole pyramid a need.
Right,
Some others
yeah.
may not. Some others may say, well, innovations and all of that and expanded AI, that's not a need. Need is literacy and math. So just some clarification would be helpful.
Well, then that's going really to the philosophy of what you want your educational institution to provide, as opposed to just the physicality
Absolutely.
of the building.
Correct.
You are now talking about philosophically, do we think all these other things are needs or wants?
Right.
And so that is a different question.
I think it's a consideration, what vision do we have for the future? And at the same point, if we are just gonna look at maintaining our current infrastructure
If
and
it's
we
just
wanna
the
lower costs.
physicality, yeah.
Well, look, and I think there was an analysis that the Santec document kind of went through and kind of gave us an idea. Look, if you're just looking at, those minimums for the 6 years, and I know that needs to be updated because we've done already some HVAC work, I
Well,
think.
Stantec was the ones that originally did the work in the fielding study. Gilbane looked at that and updated it based upon the interviews with the principals and engineers to kind of update it where we're at with the, some of the work we've done with ESSER money. So Gilbane is the most recent one that we'll use to kind of evaluate that.
But I liked looking at that one because it looked like, it's like, look, if you're gonna address the critical needs 1 to 2 years, and then up to 6 for, secondary needs, and you have those amounts, it kind of gives you that, okay, we're just gonna keep the buildings humming along with what they need. There's no vision per se
Vision,
about
right.
what we're doing moving forward. I think there is something to be said about, okay, if we're looking at bare minimum, that's what that is, right? Now, I think it's worth the conversation. What vision do we have for the future? Because I'll say, in my opinion, I think we need that. I think we need to move forward with that. I think families will want to come to Dearborn because of that. I think, again, we're at a critical inflection point. Even if we did the work, that does that in 10, 15 years, we're going to be sitting here having this conversation again.
Well, but then the question is, do the taxpayer, or the voters, do the taxpayers want that? Because what our vision might be is completely different potentially from the people who are going to be at the ballot box.
And I think we start with
And they might think, I'm only willing to pay for keeping the building standing.
Yeah. And I think we put it out there, we get that feedback, but I
Yeah,
also think
that's
we
what
give
I'm
a
saying,
start,
we
we give a starting point with some of that vision. And I think we literally mock ups, things like that, maybe the other things. This is what this could look like, and then this is what this could look like here in Dearborn.
Right.
Yeah, and I think your pyramid is instead of saying needs and wants, really forget that language. Your pyramid is comprehensive. It includes infrastructure, safety, security, needs, and trending educational movements. So we all know the trend is learner-centered environments, not teacher-centered environments. That's where you get your flexible rooms. That's where you get your learning, designing spaces on how students learn and what they need to be able to learn. So that's something I think parents would understand and students would understand. And then, beyond that, the expanded, not just college track, but career track. And I think parents have said, give us that, we want that, or residents have said that. I want and you've said it, Trustee Bazey, can I graduate from high school and ready to begin a career? What do we need to do to make that happen for our students? So those are needs. It's also a vision. And I guess our task is then to explain to the voters why these are needs. That's our job. They don't necessarily know why it's a need. And when I say they, I'm generalizing. Some may not realize the trends that, that we're moving towards, but that's our responsibility. So if you don't mind, I think using the pyramid as our backdrop for creating these proposals would give us a nice balanced approach to begin with, and then moving to the community with that.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
With the assist from Trustee Bazzi, now you are putting it all together, and I see some dots getting connected. So yes, full circle, appreciated.
I did have one question. What does the tax, when the taxpayer is paid, have to do when we put the bond? I get it, it's impacting their pocketbook, but is there a reason for asking the question, when would they be taxed? What's the dependency for choosing the date to have it on the ballot?
Personally, I think twofold. One, when the funds start coming in and we make that decision, we can start getting to work on that. And I know that even some of our mills are continuing to be reduced over the next few years. So it lessens the impact of what
People are paying.
what the people are paying, So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, 2028 or 2029, there is a line item that will be
Well,
paid?
2032, when the 2003 bond would come off the books.
In 2032, you said?
2032.
2032.
32, so it's a
There's
way.
also
It's a ways.
city millage that will go off the books as well, like the sewer
What year? do you know?
project. I believe 2028. but
2028. So
100% sure.
there is a reduction that's coming.
No, I thought it was 32, and we just had one in 23 went away. So from a millage, I don't know if there's an impact, whether it's this year or next year, and you could correct me. But if you're looking at it from when the taxpayer would be billed, I was trying to figure out the dependency that you're looking at it. Like, what's driving the choice of this year versus next year with regard to when are they being taxed?
It's less about this year and next year and more about if it wasn't this year, any of the other three plans, the first time somebody's taxed is 2028. I just wanted to
So
understand.
there's no dependency to say this year versus next year if we're ready.
I'm sorry?
If the preparation is ready, the tax that you're asking for, when are the taxpayer going to be taxed, is not a dependency.
Not necessarily, no. I do think there is an advantage of some tax reduction that's happening over the next few years that I think should be articulated, but no, I
Well-
don't think it's a dependency.
Okay, I was trying to see if there's a millage expiring, if there's something. It doesn't sound like it. There's nothing that's driving when are people going to be taxed? There's no millage expiring next year to say, wait till next year, so it would be lower.
Correct.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure.
I believe what's going to be driving the date is more of the amount and the amount of work that we will do. If it's going to be a bigger bond, as you mentioned, that might drive the date further.
And if
Just
we're ready,
saying.
I mean,
But if it is something that is smaller, then definitely within this
that helps
year's
me.
range.
I think, and don't quote me on the numbers, I know that probably the 26th summer bill, it's roughly 1.22, the mill that we have. And then looking here, it's going to reduce about 20% and then reduce even more for the next 4 years and then drop off. Just something to keep in mind, even the mills that are coming from the schools are going to be reduced and eventually that particular mill will be gone.
Correct.
President Moser.
Yes.
So one thing we didn't talk about, that I'd like to talk about, and I agree with Mr. Bazzi, is our high schools, our sporting events. Our facilities are far below most high schools outside of our city. You go to any of these high schools, their complexes are up to date. and that draws the attention also. So as we go down the road, we need to think about our sporting
Athletics.
facilities.
So we have, that's also been something we've been working on already. And not just high school, and going back to CTE and then student retention. We are starting with middle school. When we think about students leaving us in high school, we need to capitalize on our middle school experience for these students, not just with making a choice when they become freshmen with where they want to attend, whether in district or out, but also using that middle school time to build the athletic facilities and programs there, and then also pre-CTE at the middle school level. So that's also been something we're working on. We're excited about that.
Thank you for that, Trustee D'Ambrosio. Anything else before we conclude the session? Trustee Sobe.
Sorry, one more thought I'm going to throw out there. This might be a request for the upcoming proposals, or if it's a little far out, we can wait and discuss this after. But if we do decide to do, or if we throw out a proposal for a smaller bond, can we also take into consideration, when we would be able to take on the next phase or 2 phases or 3 phases to finish the rest of the projects? Just so we know ahead of time, that might help factor in timeline and urgency. That's
Is
all.
that something you want us to do now?
No, I think the more I thought about it, I'm like, this might be a lot. So, but when we get to that discussion,
Yes.
don't let me forget it, please.
Yeah. I think definitely having those options later, like
Yep.
disaggregate what we come up with now.
Yep.
Yeah, once we've made a
First,
a
let's do the
decision
big, yep.
Where we're headed originally, we can then have
Yep. then we
forward
can-
that conversation on.
Yep.
Okay. David?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to just kind of piggyback off of a comment that Trustee Bazey said earlier and expand on it a little bit. Just acknowledging and appreciating the teachers and principals for the work they do in the buildings that we have. I think that also that's why there's a disconnect between how serious the need is and what are buildings, because of the non-instructional operational staff, engineers and custodians, our skilled tradespeople, our operations people. They are keeping these buildings together so that there is a seamless transition between every school day, between every seasonal change from fall to winter, winter to spring, spring to summer, and we don't see that. It's behind the scenes. All we see is schools functioning every day, open, ready for our students. And that is a credit to those non-instructional people behind the scenes keeping it going. But I'm telling you, they're reaching the breaking point. The shoestrings, the duct tape, whatever is being done to keep these things going, their innovative spirit and their innovative techniques to find parts for equipment that is no longer even made anymore. These folks are finding companies that will manufacture and create parts that are needed to keep our buildings running. That's not going to go on much longer. And we are going to reach a point where schools stop functioning for weeks at a time and children are home for days at a time. And then there won't be that disconnect then. Then for sure people go, oh my gosh, yes, we have a critical need. And we are doing a great job of making sure that that doesn't happen. And again, it's hats off to those folks on that other side who are making that happen. But we're pushing them to the limits. We're pushing the equipment, the schools, and the people to their limits. And the further we put this off, the closer we get to reaching that critical point. Thank you.
I think that's a great point. I remember when we went to Lori Elementary, they were talking about the facilities there. And you have to be such a skilled person at Lori and develop such high skill that Ford Motor Company people were leaving to go work at Ford because they've learned so much and they were poached because of the amount of skill that those people need to be able to help these schools continue to come along. And I think those stories need to be put out to the residents. You know, it's a great thing that they can do that, but why are we in such dire straits that is needed? And I think, you know, I thank you for bringing that up, because without them, we would have significant issues. And I want to thank Tom and David. You know, a lot of what they've put together, a lot of what we've talked about, a lot of what they've brought up, they've done a lot of great work with that. So thank you.
And thank you to our partners as well for the work they've done and for the amount of information that they supplied us to make those critical and very important decisions. Okay, if there's nothing further, there's one last thing I'd like to do, and it's not related to infrastructure, but we are in the beginning stages of searching for a new superintendent, but I'd like your availability, my colleagues. So the survey came, and we couldn't even find a date where all of us will be available. Unfortunately, you know, with the timelines that we have. So, but there is one day where I'll ask Trustee Petlishkoff maybe if she can be available. Maybe you want to pull up your calendar. The 8th, this Thursday. You were the only trustee besides Trustee Czar, but Trustee Czar is not available on all days, so.
Okay, what time on the 8th? I
6?
okay. Yeah, I'll do it.
All right, thank you for that. Appreciate that. So Thursday is another study session for the superintendent search, and we're gonna have
What time?
6 o'clock.
Okay. I think that should be
Is that good?
fine. We have,
Trustee Sub, Trustee Bezzi?
Yes.
Okay,
no, I was going to say, we had a school improvement, but that's at 4:15, so we should be fine.
okay, perfect. All right, so it is 6 PM here, and it will be with our consultant from the Michigan Leadership Institute.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. The last things that I mentioned in the beginning, are there any citizens wanting to address us, or even staff members? All right, there are none. This meeting is adjourned at 9:04. Have a good night.